Triangle Squared Game Awards.
Merry Christmas, y'all.
Hello and welcome to Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. I am your host, Brett Beck, and alongside me, Mr.
Saul Bridges, bringing you guys Lucky 92, episode 92.
That's a new table, so a new sound.
New table, new sound.
And secondarily, are you sure it's 92?
Pretty sure.
We're going to roll with it. We're going to say it's 92.
Did my laptop finally die? I think my laptop finally died.
All right, so go check it out.
I'm going to go check it out so we can do just in case you guys are wondering why this episode might be late, just by a little bit. Take a look around us for you podcast listeners or audio listeners. You're all podcast listeners, I guess. But if you're an audio listener, come to YouTube and check out our brand new set that Brett has worked very hard for, slaved hours on. So everybody in the comments, everybody in Discord, everybody on Twitter, tweet at us or talk to us and congratulate and thank Brett for this new professional looking set. Brett did this all the paint, everything. This is completely new and redone. So everybody give Brett a round of applause.
I give myself a round of applause. It's been a lot of work and I'm very tired from it. But the other thing you might want to see, in case that wasn't enough to pull you through, is our nice festive set. I want you to, it's more than just this is a new set, but this is more so Christmas themed today, and I'm wearing a nice looking PlayStation sweater.
What episode did I say this was?
92.
It's 91.
I had a feeling, but I was like, we'll see. All right, well, welcome to episode 91. If this is your first time joining us for some odd reason, first of all, Merry Christmas.
Yes.
This is a Christmas Eve episode, and we're recording on Christmas Eve. This is going on in the morning, like Saul said, so it might be a little bit late. But you can normally find us on Monday at 12 p.m. CST and 10 a.m. PST on YouTube in video format. If you like what we're doing there, subscribe and hit the little bell notification to let you know when our episodes come live. There is a lot of stuff that's going to be happening in the new year. New set brings new opportunities and new ideas that we are rolling through. So this is kind of our shot at growing a little bit. With that said, you can also find us on audio only format or in audio only format on podcast services, be it Spotify, Google Play Music, iTunes, all that mess. Excuse me, my milk from my cereal is wanting to burp up. I don't want to do that.
Oh yeah, no.
It's good cereal though. It's Fruity Pebbles, and everybody
loves Fruity Pebbles.
It's impossible not to love. If you don't love Fruity Pebbles, then I think I might be angry at you. But it's okay. I'll forgive you.
Life-changing hack: 2 scoops of ice cream, a cup of milk, and Fruity Pebbles into a blender and make a milkshake out of it.
That sounds incredibly good.
It is. I used to do that a lot.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly good.
Back when I was a chubby little kid.
Saul was a chubby little kid. We should put pictures of us as children up one of these days. I'm going to laugh at you.
I literally can go home whenever I go grab your Christmas present and take a picture of me out of the photo album. I'll put it in Discord. I like the kid from Heavyweights. By the way, that was me. If you're going to get a Google sign-in alert, that was me.
Okay, cool. Anyway, like I said, you can find us in audio-only format, Spotify, Google Play Music, all those. Be it you have an Android, iPhone, computer, whatever you're listening on, you can do it so there. You can find us on social media at Triangle SQRD for our Twitter, where we go on and we have our reader mail tweets, which we'll go into that in a little bit. We also have a Facebook group, and that is a Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. That's the group. If you go and request to join, we'll gladly let you in, and we do stuff over there. Saul is absent from there because he doesn't have a Facebook, but that's okay. I do, and we have plenty of other people from the community in. And you can find us on Discord, where the conversation never ends, and that link is in the description below. So we invite anyone to jump in, have a lot of conversations with us, and stays pretty active most of the time. I've been away because of this and sickness and kidney stones, but I'm a father now. Of a kidney stone. Oh,
okay.
Yeah, different kind of father. It changed me in different ways, but also similar ways.
Yeah, they're no fun. I had a real bad stomach flu. Like this whole from Monday up until technically Thursday, I was not good.
Okay.
So for those in Discord and on Twitter who did not see me much, you know why. I promise you, I was not good. Even at Sean, I was throwing up at work. I was like, I'd go home. I was like, no.
And Saul doesn't miss work.
Yeah, I don't ever call into work unless I really have to.
He's got impeccable work ethic. I'm proud of him. All right, but with that said, today's episode is going to be different from our standard episode. One of the first things that we're going to go ahead and get into is that today's episode will not have news. That is not something that's just going away for good, but we do not have news today because of the fact that this episode's already... News is slowed down. There's a couple things like there it went. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man suit is now in Spider-Man. That's just a quick thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people complained about it, and I think it was handled in a very interesting way where people complained, and enough people have gone into that, and I feel the exact same way. I don't necessarily think it's fair to try and have these people who have been beating down on Insomniac when they've obviously been working on this for a while. And of course, not only that, the rights they had to get from a bunch of different things, which probably wasn't as hard because Sony is behind this and Marvel, but there's still some stuff that had to go down, I'm sure. With that said, though, that is one thing. If you played Darksiders 3 or had any interest in it and maybe didn't want to get it because it was too Dark Souls-like for you, they have gone back and made a classic mode for combat where you can actually play, and it's more forgiving. It's got more invisible frames. You can dodge mid-attack now instead of having to commit to your attack, if those are things that you're into. Go pick that game up or play it again, and you may enjoy it even more if you wanted it to play a little more like the other games. I personally liked it. It switched things up. But that's about all I want to get into on the news side. There will not be a drop this episode. There typically is no drop on Christmas anyway stuff, so we're just going to leave that alone. Be sure that you're keeping up with the holiday sales that are going on right now. There's a flash sale that
January sale is early.
Yeah, the flash sale may be over. I don't quite know because there's normally weekends.
Tomorrow. No, they end on Tuesday mornings.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So they last 4 days? I thought they were over the weekend only.
Maybe flash sales are different, but I thought they all lasted till Tuesday. Somebody correct me. Somebody let me know.
I don't know. Yeah, but the holiday sales moving through. We're in week 2 of the holiday sales is what it looks like right now. So there's more to that. Keep an eye on those. They change every week, it looks like. Some of them I'm sure will stay. But with that being said, the point of this episode and part of the reason we're not going to do reader mail is...
Got an announcement. So if you love reader mail, I have good news. If you don't like reader mail, I also have good news. So reader mail is gone, but not completely.
What a way to word it. It's like if you did or didn't like it, it's gone. Either way.
It's reader mail will no longer be a part of the weekly shows. So what we're going to do now instead is that on Twitter and on our Facebook group and now on our YouTube comments. YouTube comments is not going to be on a schedule really, but on YouTube and on Facebook, we're going to put out a post on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. On Twitter, we're just going to put out one post on a Monday, and then we're going to retweet it on Wednesday and on Friday. So we're going to give you guys an extra day to ask questions. Then, instead of answering any of them on the actual show, we're going to allot that normal 30 minutes to more discussion in the news or to more discussion in the main topic. We're going to keep the episodes pretty much the same length. This is more so we don't feel rushed in discussing things in the news or things in the main topic. Also, you're going to get your questions answered. Now it's going to come, instead of a monthly reader mail, it's going to come bi-weekly. So we're going to revamp reader mail completely. The first episode should be out technically next Friday.
Yep, it will hit the original schedule the first Friday of every month.
Yeah,
and then
for this first one,
yeah, then it'll move from there. So any questions that you asked about December that have not been answered yet, there will be reason. Any of the ones that obviously we don't get to in this episode, they are going to be answered, and that means that the first episode is probably going to be quite lengthy because of the way that it's going. But then from there, the readers' mails will be more often, but a little shorter, most likely. Yeah. Unless y'all just pump us full of questions, y'all can y'all will determine that. But part of the reason I think, and Saul didn't quite get there, and I may have stolen it from you.
You did.
But would you agree that part of the reason we're doing this, is like you said, maybe slimline and focus the show a little more?
Slimline and focus the show. And
I'm going to say slimline. I guess focus the show.
Yeah, more focusing on topics and news in the show to engage us a little bit more. But it's also going to be to help us be... There's been a little bit less engagement in reader mail lately. So this is going to kind of help not only get more tweets out there and more posts out there because you get the one extra day, and you're going to get that across Facebook and Twitter, but we're now going to ask you guys to ask us questions in the YouTube comments. If you get a question selected in the YouTube comments, we're going to like it. And that's how you're going to know that we're going to answer it in the Reader Mail episodes. You'll have the little Nartec Gaming liked this, and it'll be a badge of honor, basically saying, "Hey, you're gonna get this answered on the show."
Honestly, love, actually, it's a heart symbol.
Yeah, it's a heart symbol. So that way, obviously, for those that are going to watch on YouTube, don't ask troll questions because you're not going to get them answered. That's kind of the selection process we're going to use, is liking it to let you know. That way, if you ask us a question and you don't get a like on it, it may be something we've answered previously in the past. It may be something we don't have an answer for. We're not going to be able to answer, obviously, all YouTube questions. So we're going to pick our favorites and answer those on the shows as well.
And they are a little harder to field in terms of the thing about social media that allows us to put specific posts that wrangle them all together and have them in one spot, which makes it a lot easier to move through and keep up with. The YouTube ones have a chance a chance be it of being more scattered. Part of obviously the idea of a new set is to get a little more engagement from the YouTube side. We've had had a YouTube since day one, but it's obviously the lesser of our traffic income. So part of this is to try and make a more visually pleasing set. Some of that's also going to bleed into the sound. One of the things that comes with the new set, and we're just not quite there because of money and time, is we're going to work on improving the audio quality as well for people who do listen audio only. Even though I pride myself in thinking that we are pretty good considering our nature and our scope and size in comparison to some. I think that I've been told multiple times, and I'm glad that part of the reason that people have even bothered to listen to our podcast is because they were able to make it through an entire episode when other podcasts just sounded like dirt.
Yeah, like tinfoil. But we hope you guys are okay with these changes for Reader Mail. Like, there won't be any Reader Mail this episode, obviously, because this is a normal episode. And I think that the people that do watch us on YouTube that don't have Facebook or Twitter accounts or don't want to make one, everybody has a YouTube account as your Google account.
So you have a way to field questions in for us, and we will do our best to work those in. And I mean, we will definitely keep up with them. Part of this new year kind of mindset, which is happening anyway. I mean, it wasn't necessarily aimed to be a new year, new show kind of thing.
Just roll out that way.
But one of the things that we are going to do is we're putting the onus on us more to make sure that we are actually scheduling the Reader Mail tweets correctly, the Facebook ones correctly. That's something. The Facebook one is one I've had a problem with, but we're setting up a lot of systems behind the scenes that will remind us to do these things adequately so that we get them out there for y'all, and then hopefully y'all engage a little bit more and give us even more questions. And for those of you who have been giving us questions, it's also holidays. I'm sure it's part of the slowdown, but we appreciate it.
Right?
It's really fun.
We always love questions from you guys, especially the repeat offenders, I should say. Like
that's going to be our new our repeat offenders.
And Richard, we love them because they always ask really good questions. So one last thing on Reader Mail is that starting this next one, December will be the last one. We're at the end of the year. Starting in January for January Reader Mail, it's not going to be called January. We're just going to roll it out as one. So episode 1 of the new Reader Mail, then 2, then 3, then 4. We're going to basically number it like we number these. And I think that's going to be a consistent way. There's not going to be January part 1, part 2. It's just going to be January. It's just going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. And we think that'll be pretty consistent. And I'm going to look into it because my schedule doesn't always allow it, but I'm actually going to look right now at an app for Twitter. Specifically, let me schedule tweets because if I can, we're going to try to have the tweets out every Monday, the same time the show goes live. So at 10 a.m. Central or 10 a.m. Pacific, noon Central, when this show goes live, there will be a tweet already live that is asking you guys to ask us questions, and it'll be retweeted at the same time on Wednesdays and Fridays. I'm going to see if that works. If it doesn't, check it out. It'll be there sometime on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, preferably early in the morning on Central Time.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how that ends up working out. But with that also, I think the last thing I want to say about Reader Mail real quick is that the reason that we also like the idea of separating Reader Mail out is that Reader Mail questions sometimes go into a little bit of a more funny territory, and we like the ability to say, hey, we're just going to do Reader Mail and be a little more lax with it. One thing that we do on this show, and it was a conscious decision that we made pretty early on, is that we would keep the show relatively clean because of what we're trying to achieve with this show, which is giving our opinions, of course, and not necessarily in a super strict or stern fashion. We still like this to feel like it's just us hanging out and talking about things, but we like to do it through the scope of giving our opinion in a clean and concise way that anybody can listen to. And I think that that's something I've argued for a long time. I think when you are giving an actual opinion and you want your opinion to be respected and heard, and I can't control whether y'all respect my opinion, but I can do my best to make it easy to try and respect what I'm saying. Part of that is by being calm, rational, and not throwing in a bunch of cuss words and getting upset and frustrated. I mean, one of the things that we do like in the show, and I noticed a lot of people have said that they like as well, is that me and Saul will sometimes get into heated arguments, but even our heated disagreements
are still friendly,
are civil and friendly, and we don't, and that's partially just because of how me and Saul are anyway, I think, but it's also because of the fact that, I mean, generally speaking, we don't want the show to devolve. Now, when we go into Reader Mail, sky's the limit. We'll say and do anything we want. That means we'll be a little more loose with our language. I occasionally will curse on here, but I try to keep that to a minimum as well. In case you're wanting to listen to this, be it around employees or whatever, if you listen at work, if you listen in a car with children, these are things I keep mindful of. And because of the nature of the show, I don't see necessarily the point of being overly vulgar by any standard. But as we move into the Reader Mails being separate, there's a good chance they're going to be a lot more goofy and interesting.
It's going to be much of an 18 plus show. So it's going to, and we have something else we're going to talk about today off topic of this show. So you guys possibly be listening out for that. I did download an app that will let me, a new Twitter client app for my phone that will let me schedule tweets. So you guys do check out our Twitter every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, noon Central, the same time the episode goes live. And you will see a reader mail tweet for us to ask us a question. And if you are, like I said, YouTuber that wants a question answered, ask us in the comments below of every episode. I'm going to skim every episode's comments and find questions to answer. We're not going to put a limit on these kind of questions. So if you ask us, 10 or 15, then 10 or 15 may get in, and we like them enough. So
yeah,
we always encourage you guys to ask us serious questions. They can be funny, they can be fun, but I don't want just troll questions. I can't even think of any. But just be like just basically have it a question we can answer and have fun with it. And it can be personal. It can be like, what's our favorite food? We always encourage people to do that. The whole point of reader mail at the very beginning was to make it personal, to let you guys know who we are outside of this, to basically make everyone who's listening feel closer as a friend instead of just a stranger on the internet. So we like that. We found friends through this, and I think that's a good way of. I think it's been fun doing that way too.
Yep.
But
absolutely. A couple other things I want to talk about before we move into the main, gist of the show. Like we've said, more opportunities come, so I don't want to fully flesh any of these out, but they are definitely coming in the first weeks of January to some extent as I figure out exactly how to do them within the confines of our new area and setup. One of those things is we're going to be doing some form of a bonus episode show. What I want to say actually is it may not be bonus episodes. I think part of what I want to do with it, we are Triangle Squared, but we are doing all of this under a bigger umbrella that we made, which is Nartec Gaming. And what we do with that, we already have had ideas of things we want to do. So one thing we want to do is start streaming more, and we're going to bring back a series that we originally were doing on the channel, and it's going to come back as a streaming thing most likely. We're still working out the exacts of that, but it's called Party Plays, and we have some episodes of that already on. They're old and they're rough quality. I would not suggest watching them, but they're there for history's sake.
Should be 3 episodes, right?
Yeah, I think. But anyway, we're going to try and refocus that and remove that into something that's going to be streamed on on Twitch, and then moved.
Pioneers.
Yeah, and then moved from Twitch to YouTube a couple days later. That way we can have a little more live interaction with people in that sense. And then, of course, we just have the ability to have a little bit more content that does make its way to YouTube for the people that actually want to watch that stuff on YouTube without necessarily interacting with us live. So that's one thing, of course, but we also have ideas of what we're going to do completely outside of gaming, potentially. We are working on that. But the one that is going to be more focused toward gaming that I want to do is essentially bring in a series where we have guest people on, be it hosts from other gaming podcasts or people that we have ran into and formed connections with throughout this endeavor. And we'll have them come on, and they'll kind of control the topic for the most part, I think is where I stand on it right now. And we'll let them kind of have a conversation, be it maybe with just me or just Saul or both of us, depending on how schedules line up. And that will be something that we are going to dive more into currently, that is in my mind as something we're going to move into and as a buff for Patreon, because that's the other thing I want to move into, is that we are going to be not only adding more shows, and that's our plan, and we're going to have time to get that done and working on that and make sure we have logos and intros and everything. But of course, we also... Speaking of logos, we got that new logo, son. So with that, we also want to change up our Patreon and get far more involved with what we're doing with Patreon. Part of this cost was actually subsidized by Patreon, and of course the cost of hosting the show. These are things that just give us a lot more flexibility and ability to add and try and do more. So for those of you who do support us on Patreon, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And if anybody else wants to support us, you can do so at any level you want, but we appreciate you even just listening to us.
Yeah.
I often say the fact that we have even roughly 500 people who want to listen to what I have to say, if not more sometimes a week, is kind of cool. And
a lot of people, I feel like Patreon, they may not see, or they don't know what people are spending their money on necessarily, so they're weary about it. But
yeah, and I think the other side of this, I do want to address the elephant in the room right now. I know Patreon is in some controversy.
They are?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into it because it's a lot of controversy.
I'll have to look up on this. I had no idea.
So if you don't want to use Patreon, we get it as well. So it's just one of those things. Like we said, we appreciate the support of all levels. But for those who do give us your money, we really appreciate that as well, because it does allow us to do a little bit more. And as we move in, those of you who give us your time may be able to help us in terms of ad revenue and stuff like that, depending on how we do that. These are things that I want to be clear on. These are things that we don't have enough of a grasp on to understand how they work. So this show has not had any kind of ad money. The only money we've ever brought in through this show has been through Patreon.
So you guys can actually see what we use the Patreon money for. Like, we're not out going to strip clubs or whatever it could be with Patreon money.
I like that's where you go.
Yeah, I was like, well,
what's the number one thing we're going to do? First of all, I want everybody to know, I had this conversation with Liam and Sarah. We do not even have a strip club in Texarkana that I'm aware of.
There's one.
We have a strip club?
Yeah, you don't want to go to it.
Wait, the Shoot? Because that's
that is not a strip club. You may see somebody stripping, but that is not a strip club.
I did not know we had a strip club. Look, I'm learning.
It's very backdoor. It's not something you really. No,
that's illegal.
Very, and it's in a very bad part of town.
Okay, yeah, I'm not dealing with that.
Imagine the worst part of town. Well, it's on Texas side. If I say imagine the worst part of town on Arkansas side, we all go to the one area that's that way. But if you or technically that. I was right. Yeah,
you're right.
But then
look, these are things that these people don't know about.
This is what the off-topic podcast could be for.
Let's tighten up and focus up. We can talk about the horrors of Texarkana at another point.
Just so you guys are aware, like, this is like what we have in mind with Patreon. It's to help out the show. There is no plans for me and Brett to retire our careers early to live off Patreon. So if it gets that big, then we really appreciate you guys. But as what we have now, it's mainly for shipping out stuff for giveaways. It is for helping stuff with this. It is for it's paying mainly it's shipping and then show cost really.
Yeah,
because we both work full-time jobs. We both work 45 plus hours a week. So
yeah, don't get me wrong. Like I say, some of this was subsidized because of Patreon, which is awesome. A lot of this was personal money. So, with that said, I wanted to do something nice, and I think it looks good.
Well, how about
Sue
this?
me.
How about this then? When you go ahead and use money from the Patreon and pay for it, and then I'll pay for the subscriptions coming up.
I mean, I wasn't talking about. Look, Saul's over here getting offended that I said personal money. I just mean
I'm just talking about to help you out.
Yeah. Anyway, look, we will get into that later. I'm getting hot in this sweater. This was a poor choice.
Almost red in the face.
It was a poor choice of wearing.
Like a strawberry.
These lights are so bright. Let's move into this main stuff. The main idea that we wanted to share with that is that there's just a lot of changes coming, and this is the first of many that you can visually see. And go ahead and eventually you'll be able to hear some too as we get a little bit more of our audio equipment coming this
cloud
way.
Lifter.
Anyway, Saul, the main gist of this episode is to handle not only our game award, so what games we want to give, but also the community game awards. We posted to the Facebook group, the Discord, the Twitter, and we had not only initially we had tweets to go out to see what categories, we'll call them, you wanted to see given to the game awards for the community thing. So what we did is we set it up. We did that. We took the ones that were mentioned the most, and if they were mentioned more than once, they guarantee made it.
Right.
Other ones that were mentioned once that I liked, which was I think maybe one, I can't remember, ended up making it in. But for the most part, we let the community decide what the awards were going to be. Most of them are pretty standard run of the mill, like you would expect, but there are a couple of odd, funny ones that I thought was a pretty interesting idea for a game award. So we'll go into those. But on top of that, not only are the categories by the community, we went from there and then posted the categories to all these places and then had essentially my favorite way of doing a vote. We don't just have nominees. And thankfully, this is kind of driven by our ability to be, since we're a little bit smaller, we can kind of actually filter these things pretty easily. We just had it to where you responded with whatever your answer truly was for each category, and whichever one was mentioned the most was the undoubted winner. It's more of a traditional, true
voting system
where it's
tally system.
It's just a ballot, pretty much. You're not filling out a ballot. You're just telling us what you want in a tally system. That's a good
pretty
way
much.
To work. So with that, we are going to go through each one of these categories, and we're going to first say what the community game award was,
and then ours,
and then we're going to move into what our awards for it is.
That's how we did last year, right?
Yeah, okay, this is pretty much going to be our tradition.
Yeah, I really like this format. I think it's a fun and it's very interactive,
and I like the community involvement in this particular part. So the first thing up.
Yeah, so shout out to you guys who participated on Twitter, and I know we had a couple in Discord as well that kind of gave us our answers there.
We had Facebook. There was a couple on Facebook. Still working on Facebook, growing a little bit. We have far more people on Twitter, but we will figure that out. First category up is the category of best new indie developer. There are a couple of new indie games that came out, new IP that came out that were made by first-time developers and development crews. And the one that was mentioned on the community side of this category was actually Digital Sun Games, and that's Moonlighter, a game that I actually really still want to play, but I've had with all the stuff I have had going on, I've not been able to play a lot of the games that I really was stoked for. Hollow Knight being one of them. Moonlighter being one of them. There's plenty. I've tried to keep up with as many as I can, and I've done well. But Digital Sun Games, Moonlighter. So if you've not checked the game out, go check it out. It looks good, and see what the community is raving about.
Looks really good.
It does look really good. I know Sean really liked it. There's a lot of Final Fantasy references and stuff in it as well, and it's an interesting idea. So go check it and the game out if you've not heard of it, and see what it's about. Saul, if this is a weird one, what are you going to go with?
Twin Motion. It's a tie. It's Twin Motion or Team Cherry.
Okay, Team Cherry is
Hollow Knight.
Yeah.
And Twin Motion, for those that don't know, is Dead Cells.
Dead Cells. And I think I'm personally, and I know that we had different experiences with the game to an extent, I would like to at least throw White Rabbit games out into the mix. They were Death Gambit.
Yeah. Man, that's okay. So that's a three-way tie. If I had to pick one, I would say Twin Motion. Twin Motion. Dead Cells was a very surprising experience. This year, I was not expecting something of such high quality and such just replayability to come from that game. I bought it twice, once on my Switch and once on my PS4, so I can play it. We did streams of it, which were really fun. That game overall was really, really good. It's the perfect pick up and play game, which it has it over for Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is more of a sit back, relax, and like get involved into this game. And
yeah, it's
also pick up and play.
I'm trying to think of the best way to word it, but I mean, I think you've nailed it on the head at least to some extent. Hollow Knight is involved from what I've seen played of it. And I want to make it clear that I've not gotten to play it, but I've seen a lot of it, and that was essentially what got me so hyped on it. It's got a beautiful art style. I think it has a cool idea. It's got an incredible value to it, because it's a very cheap game. I think it's $15 and it's like a 40-hour game. That's really crazy. I mean, even if you want to say 30, I don't know.
I'm trying to think, is it $15 or 19?
Even if it's 19, dude. I'm pretty sure it's $14.99.
I highly recommend picking it up.
But yeah, it's got a great price tag, and typically for indie games that do sit in that price range, you don't see that kind of length from them. At least when they are games that have a full, because Death Gambit has a actual length to it. Death Gambit was probably about 10 hours, 9 hours, I want to say, a memory, but maybe not even quite that long.
Like 5 hours.
No, I wasn't that short. If you were actually exploring, now of course you can beat those games quicker.
I was like, technically,
I want to make that clear. There are optional bosses, and there are different routes. I got borderline
halfway through the game in like 30 minutes that we did the little speedrun thing.
Yeah. When you know where you're going, it's just like Dark Souls. You can run through it quickly if you wanted to. But I mean, traditional sit down and play when you haven't had experience with it, you're probably going to spend around 8 hours for it. I would
still
say.
Never beat that game. They fixed it after there was a crashing part in which I was having an issue with, and they finally fixed it. I never went back, and I need to.
Yeah, see, that's what I was going to say. The reason I want to throw White Rabbit in is because the game was amazing and I really enjoyed it. That experience is tainted by the fact that it just launched with so many, I don't want to say so many problems, because when you put it against other games that have launched this year with big problems, their problems kind of seem not so crazy. A little
more minor, yeah.
And I think it's also, when you think about it, a new developer making their first game, coming out and handling all this and trying to make a game for not only PC but PS4. I understand to an extent, and I was trying to be lenient, but there was some frustration. I will say this. I did appreciate that every problem that I had, when I tweeted about it, the developer was instant almost. Replying and offering not only just the fact that they were sorry that it was happening, but an actual fix. And I appreciated that more than anything.
Yeah.
So it showed me that they knew what the problems potentially were, but they were trying to work with a small team at getting them patched. And for those of you who don't necessarily know about patches on consoles, PC patches are very easily handled. You can just push them out. On console, they have to be approved, essentially. They have to go through certification, and that costs money, and that takes time. So you want to make sure, A, that you get as many fixes as you actually know are wrong into a single update if possible, definitely when you're dealing with a small budget and you're having to pay for this. And you have to make sure that you're not literally pushing out one update just to have to do another one in 2 days because of something you didn't think to fix.
Yeah.
So they were trying, and I want to give them that. And it's unfortunate the game lost. The game launched with bugs, but I was able to beat it at launch with the one area I was having massive problems with. They fixed, by telling me what to do, and it was specifically related to my PlayStation Pro.
Yeah,
I had a couple of
PlayStation enhancement.
I had a couple of other just random crashes, but not extremely severe. The game exuded, just interesting ideas on top of an already established game formula. This was a good year in terms of different games taking the Dark Souls idea and trying to change them in fun ways, and that was one of them.
I could agree.
But since that was more of the runner-up, and I do think that it's commendable what they did and what they tried, I'm going to move into what I think is the answer. Because I didn't play Hollow Knight, I obviously can't do that. I'm going to say Twin Motion as well. One thing to clarify, Twin Motion, this is not their first game. This is their first game of notoriety, is what I should essentially say. Realistically, I think this was their first console game. So when you're thinking about it in that sense and you're moving along, I'm going to consider this their
Motion Twin.
Yeah, I said Motion Twin.
No, we've been saying Twin Motion.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Yeah, we got it reversed. But yeah, Motion Twin.
Yeah.
Sorry, Motion Twin, if you're listening. Your game's good.
Yeah, if you're listening to this incredibly obscure podcast. You know what? Hey, everybody tweet at them and tell them when we screwed up their name. I'm kidding. Don't do that.
No, yeah, do that.
Do it if you want
we
to.
love them. They did a good job. I want them to hear
anyway,
that.
Motion Twin. Yeah, thank you. Dead Cells is easily one of my absolute favorite games of the year.
Just hold on. The next topic. The next thingy.
What?
The next thing.
What? I'm not moving into Game of the Year discussion. Dang, son.
Oh, I thought you were literally going into the next award.
No.
I was gonna say. I will say that Motion Twin got it. That's it right there.
Yeah, but I was just. You obviously mentioned on yours, but I think that the fact that not only Saul and I both, but plenty of people I know played that game only for like a month after its release. I played that game so much, and there's something that's fun about it.
I got burnt out on it. I played it so much that I got burnt out on it.
I didn't even get burnt out on it. I just beat it.
I never beat it.
And I was like, I did it. I finally done it.
I got to the big old like Grand Castle area.
Yeah, I beat it, and then I went back and put the modifier on that they give you after you beat it that changes like different enemies that are normally harder in the game.
Did you get the platinum?
No, not at all. As much as I love the game, if I had more time, I would probably work toward the platinum. That the modification system is not easy. And then it also introduces those doors that you see throughout the world that have these little circle things on them.
Runes on
so the
them.
more times that you roll through the game, if you beat the first modifier, you get a second modifier, and you keep rolling through that way. And depending on the number of modifiers you have, there are doors that you can find and knock on in the normal playthrough that do nothing. But if you have one modifier on and you're at a door that's got one circle, you can knock at it and it'll go through, and it's a shortcut or a hidden area, stuff like that. And I thought that was a cool idea for replayability. And the other reason I want to give them some credit is that they have gone on and you bought the game. If you did buy the game, you should. They have added on stuff to the game. So this is a game that is essentially a starting point for them, and it had an ending that wasn't satisfying necessarily from a story standpoint, which the story is very loose in that game. But it is interesting, and they are moving on from there, and they're adding new bosses and new areas. So if that sounds interesting to you, go check it out.
Yeah, totally worth it.
All right, Saul, you got the next category you want to go through?
Sure. So next category is Best Indie Game. What did you guys like? Because the winner... What?
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say because the winner from our community is Celeste. So I know Corey is incredibly happy right now.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, Corey's over there just like, yeah.
So Celeste is pretty good. I played like the first couple hours of it. Still haven't gotten back onto it. I know Blaze really likes it too. And Blaze... He's a really big Mega Man, Metroidvania style person, and that's a testament to how good this game is. If you like those, very challenging, very you're gonna die a lot.
It's a precision platformer.
It's a very retro precision platformer. You messed me up too, but for me,
what's funny about Celeste, real quick?
Oh,
me and Blaze played that game in 2016
at PSX, right?
I think, and 17. We played both at PSX, and it was an entirely different game. Like it was still precision platforming, but the character was different. It had
was it a boy?
No, it was still a girl.
Okay.
But way different art style, way more chubby, and the way that they went about doing things. And it was a slightly different art style, and it definitely had a different tonal value to what it was trying to do across the levels. It had more of a cutesy design, but you could tell that they were still definitely in the early stages of. I thought that was going to be the game, and it was fun, but they went ahead and from. This is somebody who hasn't played the newest release. It's funny. I played it beforehand, but the actual release version of the game decided to tack on an actual story and try and attack things like that. So while I can't speak on those personally, I know that Corey and a couple of other people I've mentioned said that the game had a surprisingly good story, and that's interesting. So I think that across the board, I think good story and good gameplay definitely makes sense as to why that would be a community favorite.
Yeah. But as a plot twist, Hollow Knight is mine. So I know this is confusing to people, but out of Dead Cells and Hollow Knight was much more of an impactful experience.
Okay.
Instead of just more of a entertaining, because Dead Cells is super good, and it honestly, if it depends on what I'm in the mood for to properly answer this question, because if I'm looking to sit down and play a really, really like impactful and deep game, then Hollow Knight is the go-to for indies for me.
I could see that, because I think to an extent I get what you're saying, is that while Motion Twin and Dead Cells, it's like this, and don't get me wrong, we obviously didn't play it that way for some periods, but it is a game that's easy enough to just sit down and bite-sized play.
Yeah, like I would get home at work after 10. I would make me some dinner. I would throw laundry on, and then for like 30 minutes, 25 minutes, I'd play Dead Cells, and then like I'd lay down. So,
and part of that is mirrored in the way that the game is designed, from being able to literally just drop out from your run and go to the home screen just to come back. That encouraged you to stop playing, even if you wanted to play something else, but come back and continue your run. So death is what actually determined your end. Whereas I've seen some roguelikes have it to where you keep the things that you have unlocked, but every time you go and restart the game, you have to restart a run. Now you still have the ability to tap into the things you unlocked, but I think that's a pretty interesting idea. So I mean,
it was executed really well.
Yeah, but I get where you're going, and I think what you mean by that is that Hollow Knight feels more like a sit down and an experience game.
Yeah, it feels more of an experience, where Dead Cells is way more entertaining. It's weird. It's like if I want to sit down and be immersed with the game, it's kind of like describing Dark Souls to like The Witcher almost, like where you want to sit in and get like rich with lore and experience the soundtracks of everything, which I'm not saying Dark Souls doesn't have none of this, but I'm just saying that typically when you sit down on Dark Souls, you're just playing Dark Souls to play Dark Souls, and you're working on getting better and, you know, getting throughout the game. It's two very different experiences, and I think that that's what lies in Hollow Knight for me, because more overall, like I said, it's more impactful. I left playing Hollow Knight after I beat it with more of an oomph than I did when I was playing Dead Cells. Dead Cells did a good job of making me feel accomplished, like Dark Souls did, or if I did something really well.
Absolutely.
Or if I beat the boss I was finally stuck on, it did a really, really, really good job of that. But Hollow Knight, when I walked away from it, I was like, that was a really, really good game. I'm going to play it again soon. And I don't typically walk away from a game like that and say that again. But Brett, what is yours?
Since I didn't get to play Hollow Knight, again, I'm so bummed that I can't speak on Hollow Knight on this outside of what I saw.
You're really going to like that game.
I know I will, and it's probably the next thing I'm going to play. I just have to figure out how to work it in. Thankfully, I have so much more time now that this is done, for the most part. But yeah, I want to come back. It's very similar reasoning behind, but I'm torn between whether I want to give this to Death's Gambit, and I've been thinking about this since this first came up and I was compiling all the answers together. I feel the same way about Death's Gambit in relation to Dead Cells. Dead Cells was way more... I'm gonna go. The reason I think that I want to give it to Dead Cells is because there is something to be said about pure gameplay feeling so good that literally all of your joy comes from just the way the game plays. I'm not gonna say all, but a lot of what makes that game feel instantly good to you is how tactile the controls were. It's easily the most fast-paced roguelike I've ever played. On top of that, it's the most fast-paced Metroidvania style of game I've ever played, and that's what's interesting about the game is it's not quite only roguelike, and it's not quite true Metroidvania, but it rests somewhere in between them. And I think that they put it the best way when they called it a Roguevania. It's essentially a fusion of the two, but it's not necessarily true to either.
Yeah.
It's got some give and take that tries to make a somewhat refreshing and unique experience in that genre, or in each respective genre. And I think that there's something about that. Like, you hear people say all the time that gameplay trumps all. And that's honestly, when done right, that's true. Now, a game that has good gameplay, but goes on too long and has a story that doesn't pick up, good gameplay will eventually fail. But when you have gameplay that's so impeccably done, like Dead Cells did, you end up with a game that I know for a fact that I could go in there and just have fun with it right now.
Yeah.
And not just because I've taken time from it. If I would have had the time to do so, I am fairly positive in saying I could have been playing this game at least multiple times, 2-3 times a week, this entire year since its release, and continued to have had fun.
It's a game that when you pick up, or at least when we pick up, we enjoy it no matter what.
And it's like I talk about with gameplay being so fun, it's odd to me that a game that is really not long and not intended to be long and not really even meant to be played in long sit-downs is a game that I would sit there and play for about 6 hours. That sounds crazy,
Yeah.
but that's what I would do, and it was so fun, and I liked trying out different weapons and different combos and the way that the game tries to reward you for what you do. And that was also one of the most fun streams we had. I just really enjoyed the idea of being able to just go through and like, hey, I'm going to run through this that I feel pretty confident in and do pretty good. And I love that about it. But, and on the same token as you with Hollow Knight, there was a little bit more going on. Even though the story wasn't amazing, I think that there was a little bit more going on from a presentation side, from a gameplay side, from a lore side. Death's Gambit just has this idea behind it that I guess feels a bit more palpable, on top of the fact that the gameplay in that game is still really fun.
Oh, yeah.
So
the
it's
gameplay
like,
in that game is really, really, really ace.
and I was really surprised to see because I'm going to say what might be a little bit of blasphemy here. I think that Salt and Sanctuary is a really good game.
Oh, I'm going to say Death's Gambit's way better.
But Death's Gambit's a way better
game.
idea of taking the Dark Souls gameplay and transcribing it to a 2D game style while also making enough changes that it feels a little more unique than Salt and Sanctuary did.
Yeah.
Salt and Sanctuary felt too similar.
Salt and Sanctuary, I hated the art style in that game.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of the art style.
Character
It
models
looked
real
like a
dumb.
Flash game.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I mean, I had fun with Salt and Sanctuary, but it didn't drive me to beat it like Death Stranding did. I think that pixel art style that Death Stranding went,
beautiful.
Death Gambit went through.
We haven't played Death Stranding yet.
Yeah, but anyway, it was very beautiful. The game just had a lot of fun ideas behind it and depth to it that, again, like Hollow Knight, but a little lesser, because Hollow Knight, like we say, is a very long game and it's a very involved game. And from the many conversations me and Saul had around it, as well as watching people play it, it's a game that demands a lot of focus and attention, but in an extremely different way than something like Death's Gambit, where it's more about Death's Gambit's a little more true to the Dark Souls idea of pay attention to your enemies and pay attention to yourself and you should overcome. Whereas Hollow Knight's like pay attention to the map, pay attention to what you've unlocked, pay attention to where you can go back. That exists to an extent in Death's Gambit where you have to go back and get keys and go back through areas that are hidden bosses and stuff. But it's not as driven into the main gameplay as I think it was from what I've seen of Hollow Knight. Would you agree with that since you've actually played both?
Hollow Knight is a very true Metroidvania in which there are times you're going to come across doorways, you're going to come across enemies, you're going to come across areas that you cannot get to, or you get to and you're like, I don't understand how I'm supposed to get past this or what I'm supposed to do here, until you go find the item and then come back, which is very classic Metroid style game.
And that's way different than just being like, oh, this is a locked door, I've just got to come back when I get a key.
Somewhat, yeah. It's
and
the
I know
same
that
principle. It's
exists.
just a different mechanic in a way.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people compare or say Dark Souls is like a 3D Metroidvania, which is crazy because I can see that, but it doesn't have too many of the values for it. But I also hear it's a 3D the best 3D Castlevania series ever made. I agree with that. Difficult, has all that cool looking gothic stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you that. All right, I'm going to move into the next category, and that is Best New Character. And I'm not surprised to see that it is Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2. So, Blake, go and clap yourself on the back. There you go. He obviously voted Red Dead for everything. Yeah. I'm not even surprised. But this actually was a pretty resounding answer. I mean, this was the primary one. The closest second we got to it was actually Baldur in God of War.
That honestly is like my second, because Baldur is such a cool bad guy.
He is, and there's let's speak on Baldur for a second. Baldur, and I'm not going to spoil the game at all, but Baldur has so much depth.
He does.
What makes him a great character is that he is one of those great villains where they took the time to make sure that with him being a bad guy, throughout the course of the story, they want to make sure that you understand, like, not only is he likable a little bit anyway, because he's smug in a weird way, but he's got, like, he's
very smug.
He exudes personality. Like, he's got this, like,
within the first, like, hour of playing the game when you first meet him, is one of the coolest openings to a game ever.
But he's very personable, but he couples that with the fact that he's antagonistic. But by the time you start to reach the end of the tale, you have a much better understanding of what led him to be where he was. And I think that what the game does best is that it plays off of the Norse mythology in such a true way. And then not only that, it's performed in such a way that it has so much more depth than you're used to seeing from a lot of video games, definitely from God of War.
Yeah.
God of War is not necessarily known for having character depth in its, and I want to say in its bosses, but that's really true in its villains. There's very, very seldom the God of War series, as much as I loved it, had villains that you truly understood. And I think part of that was because Kratos himself in the other games was always meant to be the anti-hero. So he takes on a villainous role himself.
Right.
And I want to say anti-hero, because I mean, in a way, he's almost the bad guy fighting just other bad guys, But I think when you look at that and what happened with God of War this roll around, and they were able to switch that where Kratos is taking on a less antagonistic role and trying to be more reserved, and then coupling that with somebody who has a real reason that you can view and be relatable to as to why they are the way they are, you end up with a really great character with a lot of depth. In a time period where there are plenty of games that come out these days that have very shallow characters. And like one of the main things that we constantly talk about, as much as I loved Horizon as a gameplay experience and even as a world experience, its number one fault was in very shallow characters. The deepest character connections in the entire game seem to be between Rost and Aloy, and then even those leave a lot to be desired for me. So, I mean, I would hope, if anything, that with Sony, Santa Monica Studios, and the way that Sony handles things, that Guerrilla work with Santa Monica Studios to try and figure out how to better incorporate their character play. Because one of the things that God of War did in general really well is made and we talked about this last night actually, every character mattered.
Yeah.
There was not a character in the game that didn't have a specific purpose, realistically.
Especially... Well, I know there's people that haven't played it yet. Never mind. I was going to speak early on when you meet a character, and then you realize how impactful that character is once you meet another character.
Yeah.
Which is really, really cool.
I'll give you that. We don't want to spoil anything, but I think that it's safe to say that God of War utilizes its characters in such a way that the characters end up coming off far more genuine and far more in-depth because of the fact that they are given ample time to grow and develop, but also ample importance in the story. Where there are plenty of times where other games, Horizon specifically in my mind, tries to give this faux importance, but it never feels earned, and it never feels really important. Like, it feels less weighty.
So is Baldur your answer? I just realized we've been talking about Baldur for a while.
That's what I'm saying. I'm going through it. I think I'm safe to say that Baldur's my answer. But I will say that Arthur Morgan is a very good answer. And my quick synopsis of that, and it's really Sean Sanderud is he summed it up perfectly. Arthur went from being somebody I didn't think I would like at all to being somebody that by the end of it, that I really, really was surprised at how much I felt attached to him. Now that I still think that Baldur and they are actually similar stories in the sense of they are people that you don't like necessarily from the get-go, but they exude personality in a way that it's hard to just hate them.
Yeah, by the
but
end,
then you work towards this thing where they're relatable in every way, and actually
you
in
understand
some ways,
their motives.
Arthur's even more relatable in terms of real human nature because the game's a little more grounded. But I think Baldur's a really good one, and I think it's maybe a slight bias by the fact that I like villains that are done well because villains so often are done poorly.
If they're done well, villains are oftentimes the best substance to the plot.
I just think there's something fun, and I mean, like I say, this still happens in Red Dead, but I think that there's a fun challenge to making somebody that you're supposed to dislike also be likable. And when you can pull that off, and definitely when they're bad guys, because the thing about bad guys, the archetypal story you tend to get from video games of bad guys is, well, he's just pure evil, and you're just trying to stop him because if you don't, he's pure evil and he'll destroy everything.
Yeah,
or
very lazy,
some mutation of that.
Yeah,
but it doesn't give you the satisfaction when you kill him because it's like, well, all I did was stop somebody who's evil.
I did my job. Yeah,
yeah.
So this isn't.
It wasn't that by the time that you reach the end of God of War, there's an entirely different take on what went down between Baldur, and it's one of those things where you're like, and the same of Red Dead. I want to be true of that.
It's a very understanding story.
I think if I had to give a close second, as much as I actually again liked Atreus in God of War as a secondary, I do think Arthur Morgan deserves my secondary spot, and I would even say it's pretty close. I just think that I do have a proclivity to lean towards really well done villains.
Yeah, and mine is Atreus. Which he can be often annoying at times.
But perfectly so.
But perfectly so. And then I think that everything they did with Atreus worked out really well. The mocap actor / voice actor did a really, really good job. And by the end of the story, especially like the last 5 minutes of the story of that game, leaves you wanting more knowledge on what, how, and why. And it made me excited to play the sequel, and I think that they used Atreus in a very clever way there. And I'm not going to say anything, obviously, because if you haven't...
You mean the end?
Yes, the very end.
Like the credit roll scenes?
Well, not necessarily the credit roll scenes. I'm talking about before the credit rolls.
Okay.
Like the last 5 minutes.
Sure.
When something is done. But I think that he did come off as annoying, which I think that is very similar parallels to Baldur and Arthur. You don't really like him at first because they're just like, why is this kid whiny? But then you realize the whole intro of him with the bow. I don't think that's too much of a spoiler, but the bow and the deer.
Yeah,
is something that's very impactful in a way.
Yeah, and I'm not going to consider that a spoiler because that was essentially the E3 thing. Now I know some people avoided the game that much.
It's also been out since March, and this is the first 10 minutes of the game. So this is not any kind of massive spoiler or anything.
Yeah.
Just in case you wondered if I just said something massive about a deer. No. It's this very, very non-spoilery in a way. It's not really. It's just content. So no significance.
Where were you finishing off with that?
I was pretty much finishing off with that. That throughout the end of the journey, you often were annoyed by him, but then you realize kind of why he's this way because he's just a child going through the things he was going through that happened in the beginning of the game. So.
Well, look, there's a lot of things that I know we're trying to play this weird spoiler territory, but one thing that Blake mentioned is that sometimes to accurately talk about a game, you have to spoil a little bit. I think what you were trying to avoid was saying is the death of the mother.
Yes.
But I'm going to go ahead and say that was in marketing material. To me, that's not quite spoiler.
Yeah.
I want to leave it to that because I think to speak about why Atreus is actually a good character and why you start to really feel for him ties into a little bit of the subject matter. We won't go into too much more.
Yeah, I was going to say, technically it's within the first 5 minutes of the title screen. So, once again, these aren't huge, impactful things to the story that you already... That's not going to be revealed in midway through. This is not anything like that. But yeah, Atreus for certain.
Yeah, and I think the thing about Atreus... and I'm curious because you don't have a kid. So this is more my own curiosity. Me personally, and I think that a lot of humans in general have this because we all have a tendency to be a little more forgiving with children. But I know that even at the beginning, obviously it's a sad time. He's lost his mother and he's trying to deal with that with a father who's refusing to deal with it. Or at least dealing with it in his own way, which is a very quiet.
Visually, yeah.
And, he doesn't go through it in the same way. There is something about that opening scene where he has his hand on the tree that is very interesting and kind of almost chilling to an extent. Because you're like, oh, wow.
Especially when
you know whose hand it is, you know what's going on, and you understand. I think that added weight to me anyway, being a longtime God of War fan and seeing what I think is so interesting about that game doing is that it starts the game off where you don't even ever get to actually see Kratos being happy with his wife. You get to see, you go from 3's ending where he's just 3 where he's a beast the whole way through until the end, and then you go to this one. We never get to see him be happy, but we're already starting in this thing where all this trauma is going on. He's doing his thing, but when you couple that And I think you have to talk about Kratos a little bit when you talk about Atreus, because part of what makes Atreus grow so great is that you are constantly seeing Atreus have to do this through Kratos' very heavy hand.
Right.
So Kratos is being very stern and not really letting him work through things the way in a way that a typical father role would be, at least by our standards of time. He's doing it in a very off-putting. He's almost trying to, like I say, in his refusal to deal with it physically himself and just keeping it all inside. He's not wanting to project that out and make sure that Atreus is okay. He's more quiet. It happened. We have a mission. Stick with it. And you see Atreus having to try and deal with this trauma while also following along with his father, who's trying to learn how to be a father. And that interplay is so good. And, we're talking about new characters. I would say, if anything, Kratos almost fits the bill, but he is an existing character. But he's so changed in this game that it's amazing. And not changed in a way that doesn't feel true to him. But that change is really important, because the change is what drives Atreus to become the character by the end of the game that you see him go through what you expect from kids to an extent.
Yeah.
But then you also see him come to grips with some things that are really interesting. And I think that they play it off incredibly well. And like you say, I'm so stoked to see
sequel.
where they lead him into the sequel.
Especially with the after credit scene involved. This next one, we have best exclusive. I think, judging by this, it's a complete 3-1. So we got God of War was the community answer. I think we can go ahead and say that's ours too.
Yeah, God of War is definitely.
So, yeah, we just spoke a lot about it. So if you guys can't tell, God of War is it's an okay game. Just okay. Corey Balrog, you made a masterpiece. Congratulations to you.
For
guys.
those of you who wanted it to be Spider-Man, I have to throw this out there real quick. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Spider-Man.
I'm not sorry because I think that it deserved it. I'm sorry because Spider-Man's a great game. Spider-Man is not. Spider-Man's not the best exclusive.
I'm not gonna say great game. Even I'm gonna say Spider-Man was a good time. I would honestly say, what would you enjoy more, Dead Cells or Spider-Man?
Dead Cells.
Dead Cells, exactly.
Now that's really, but for different reasons. So I mean,
I know,
you're
but
right.
Still,
you're right.
It's Spider-Man. You know what? We talked about it point before. Spider-Man was a big letdown this year for us. It was still a good game, still worth the $60 we pay for it, still worth the experience to play through it.
Still worth I would even say, to an extent, if you wanted to just really say, was the game worth the hype?
No.
The game is worth the hype in a sense of, if your hype was only built on your own expectation,
which is subjective per person.
Yeah, sure. If you played it like that, I think that there's an easy way to say that it was worth the hype, but I think that the marketing machine that was obviously going to come from this game
really messed it up.
Obviously had some effects on the hype. Now, I will say this.
Go watch our impressions episode, because we talked about it pretty in-depthly there.
I will, and we should have went into more spoiler. The more I've sat on Spider-Man, I love Spider-Man. I mean, really, I love the game.
Yeah, it's a good game. We should, I'm not going to clarify, it's not something that's even in any part of a contender for Game of the Year for me.
Same. I don't even consider it a contender either.
It's a good game. It's worth this pickup, no matter what the price. It's $60 or on sale. It's worth the price, but it's just not something that I was expecting more out of Sucker Punch. A lot. I mean,
Insomniac.
I do that a lot. I don't know why I mix those up.
Well, because originally Sucker Punch was rumored to be making the game.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyways, I expected a lot of Insomniac. I expected probably more than what we got, and I was just generally let down by mainly the story. There was times in that game that just felt like it went from 60 miles per hour to 0, and it was very frequent.
And I'm not going to say not even the story. It was the pacing of the story.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, each part of the story was fine. It's the way that they went about trying to stitch it together. And I know some of that, like we talked about, was in this attempt to make you play as Peter Parker and understand, because I will say the best way to describe this is that the reason that I think other Spider-Mans failed in the story department so badly, because this game ultimately did have a good story. I think that the reason the other games in the series have traditionally failed in really the story department, they're just fun games that have, a romping story where it's like, well, there's something to it, but it's really just fighting enemies that are cool. But I think one of the things that this game did to make sure that it actually had a compelling story is it made you play as Peter, so that you actually went through some of Peter's grief, where they always try and play this. The video games always try and play off of Spider-Man's grief, but the movies always try and play through the dichotomy of having to be Peter and Spider-Man at the same time, and they finally handled that now in a video game in a way that I thought was really well done. But pacing was the biggest issue, and again, I think that's another thing. And I will say, completely odd sounding maybe to some, but do you remember one of your very, very small complaints of God of War was not necessarily pacing, but that the game kept doing this like kind of
drawn out thing almost
to an extent.
Like it was artificial lengthening
I enjoyed
the
it.
game.
I enjoyed it. I don't really think it was artificially lengthening the game.
It felt artificial,
but they could have maybe whittled it down a little bit.
Yeah, they could have.
But
the
the payoff,
off the edges.
The payoff made
the payoff was way worth it.
Yeah, the payoff made the growth.
Spider-Man was not. And
yeah,
by the end of Spider-Man, I was like, well, we saw that coming. The ending is not a surprise.
Whereas that's exactly the idea. God of War's ending was not easily predictable.
Yeah.
Spider-Man's was.
God of War.
I expected Spider-Man's ending from the first 20 minutes of gameplay.
Yeah, and it sets you up for a sequel in God of War. And Spider-Man, the after credit scene, as Marvel normally does, sets you up for a cool sequel. But it's kind of like, at the same time, it's like, is it going to be like this game? Because I'm not really looking forward to it if it is, which is sad.
Well, I'm looking forward to it and I'll play it, but I'm not going to be the same amount of hype.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and for those that are...
I do think that they have the ability, real quick, to do, and I've said this from the get-go, I do think they have the ability to grow. I would argue that in a lot of ways, Spider-Man's probably the best first entry of a superhero game ever, but the thing about Spider-Man is that Arkham Knight is still, and I went back and replayed it to make sure that I wasn't just, looking too nostalgically at Arkham City. I'm sorry. Arkham City. Arkham City, to me, is a better game. And it's funny. I think that if you took the Spider-Man that we got this year and you put it in the same idea that it took, which was big AAA values and stuff, and you put that on PS3 in that generation, I think where gaming was at that point, that game would have been amazing. But because of the year that we've been in and the way that games have come out that have had great pacing, great stories, great acting, great gameplay, you get in this landscape where it shines less because of that.
And I think that...
But it has the ability to do Arkham City.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head pretty well there.
Where the next game's better.
Yeah, for those, like, if you haven't watched our Spider-Man impressions, go watch it there. We go way more in-depth than that, and I think it's more of an understanding thing once you hear us actually talk about that as the main topic. Brett, next one.
I actually love the answer for this one because I agree with it entirely wholeheartedly, and it's my answer as well. So I'll go ahead and get that out of the way. The community answer for best ongoing game. Now, we'll be clear as to what that is real quick. Ongoing game is specifically a game that did maybe even release very early this year, but released most likely last year or the years before and has continued to be supported throughout this thing. So you have games like Fortnite, of course. You have games like Rainbow Six Siege, and I think that there's a lot to be said about Rainbow Six Siege and even realistically Grand Theft Auto 5. I think there's a lot to be said about the fact that that game is so old and they continue to update it. Because it's cash cow,
they just launched a new multiplayer thing for it.
I know.
It's like Red Dead's out, guys. What are you doing?
Yeah. Well, there's money to be made.
Oh, there's a lot of money to be made.
And there's people that are happy that they're still supporting it. So in that sense, I understand it. But as for best ongoing game, the community answer was No Man's Sky. And I think that there is undoubtedly no better answer because it is the exact turnaround, and the game is essentially what everybody wanted from the get-go now. Now, whether or not you still enjoy that type of game is up to what games you enjoy. But Hello Games have finally reached the point where the game is exactly at, and even actually a little bit more than what they originally intended. Would you agree with that, Saul?
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. And I've said it before, I commend Hello Games and Sean Murray for sticking on it. You could have just did nothing about it. You could have just accepted the failure of the game, and then you probably wouldn't put out a new game anytime soon. But look at you. You are. At the Game Awards, you have a new trailer. And now that trailer, if that came out without this kind of reception, would have been terrible. It'd be like, oh, so you just completely stopped on No Man's Sky. Now you have this new game. We're all screwed.
Why would we support your game?
Yeah.
But
now that game's going to receive a lot of warm reception because the general reception and thought process around No Man's Sky now is generally positive. It's not negative like it was, 5, 6, 7, 8 months after launch.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's safe to say that the best way to word that is that I think you're right. They could have dropped No Man's Sky completely and left. But I think that Sean Murray and team were smart enough to know that they screwed up, and that's just I don't think anybody really argues that No Man's Sky was, even though I enjoyed it at launch, I know some people didn't, it was still a screw up, and it was a lot of false marketing and stuff like that. But I think when you look at it in this sense, I don't think that Hello Games would be around anymore if they did that. I don't think they would have ever made another game. I don't think that and I think even if they did, like you say, even if they decided that, okay, it's time to make a game, it wouldn't have lasted. It wouldn't have been this thing. It would have been a terrible setup of, oh, unfortunately, nobody's going to have trust in them again as a developer because they sold us a broken game and then ditched it. I think that they had to do exactly what they did. And in case you just for some reason don't know, they released a game that, yes, did not have any of the stuff that they hyped up into it. And it just,
I think everybody knows about that.
Everybody probably knows about that.
Just like everybody knows about something coming on the list here soon.
They have updated that game for free in massive ways that have got it not only to where it was originally supposed to be at launch, but even more included. And I commend them for that. I think I think they deserve to be commended. I obviously think that they deserved to be pointed the finger at when they launched the game in the state that they did. I don't think that's unfair at all. I think some people took it a little too far, but I think that we as a market and we as a group of hobbyists and whatever you want to call us, gamers as a general, I think we do have a responsibility to do something in between where when people mess up, I think it is fair that we all point the finger and go, look, you messed up. That's just a fact. Now, I would like it to not get just dirty like it sometimes does, but I think that there's fair enough to go, you screwed up, what are you going to do to fix it? And I think that the correct response from a developer in that situation is to do exactly what they did, which is go, we're going to commit to the game, and we're going to own up to our mistake, and we're going to fix it entirely free. We're not going to expect you to spend any more money to play this game in the state that you wanted it.
Big factor, the fact that it was all free.
Yeah, and I think that they probably would have been okay even if they charged for it at least after the first year or two. Like, do one big update that fixes it for everybody and then do more add-ons.
Yeah, kind of like almost like a DLC content release schedule in a way, but it's no schedule. It's just like, here's new content, here's new content, here's new content.
Exactly. So I think that they deserve it. And you know what? Shout out to Sean Murray and No Man's Sky. I hope you're in a better place now and things aren't so bad as they were. And use that as a lesson, man. Don't ever try and let your hype and I assume fear was somewhat involved in the fact that he kept saying these things despite the fact that I know he knew at that point that they weren't going to be in the game.
And potentially Sony's dollars. Don't let the big publishers and companies like possibly bully you. That goes for any game developer.
Now
we all know that answer to mine though.
Yeah. Go for it.
Destiny 2.
Yeah.
Like that's very, very unsurprising. Basically, Forsaken has completely revitalized the game. It's what Taken King was to Destiny 1. And it has brought back people. And even like last night, we played the year 1 raid, the Leviathan, and we had 6 people. We played until 2 a.m., even though I had to wake up at 8 a.m. to come over here and start recording. It's something that is magical with friends and family to play with, even though I don't have any family plays with it, but if you do, shout out to you. I do think, though, it's technically counts, but not really. Sea of Thieves deserves a little head nod, even though we're a PlayStation podcast.
No, I want to. Actually, Sea of Thieves is going to come up with something else for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But I do think that they do deserve a little bit too. They are essentially the Microsoft analog, and I know we're PlayStation, but I'm just going to throw it out there. They are essentially the Microsoft closest. It's not exactly as bad. They are the closest thing that Microsoft themselves has had to a No Man's Sky style launch. It was a game that launched at a high price, which was full price, same as No Man's Sky. Didn't quite feel like it should have been full price and had a gross lack of content. Now, that doesn't mean that it wasn't fun, just like No Man's Sky was, but they very quickly were able to try and pull that together and make a game that is at least worth, in my opinion,
worth a Games Pass
subscription.
Games Pass
subscription. Yeah. And that's all that really truly matters, because I don't think most people spent full price on that game.
No. And I know we didn't. I know.
We talked about that. I think most of that game was Games Pass subscription.
Pretty much, yeah. And I will say this as a quick addendum is that if you want to play the game with us, and you got Games Pass, you got an Xbox, hit us up.
Yeah.
Let's see. Next one on the list, we have Best Shooter. I had to look at my trophies to remember what shooter games I played this year. That's crazy, right? Other than Destiny, Destiny and like Rainbow Six, like I don't really play shooters anymore. It's like go-to things.
Which is, I want y'all to know how wild that actually truly is.
That's very wild. The fact that I had to, go back and look at trophies because I couldn't remember what it was. And the sad thing is, I looked at trophies and I've already forgotten.
Well, first thing I want to say is that this was not a huge year for shooters. One of the first notable ones that came, and even if you want to consider it shooters, which in a lot of ways it really is, it's a first-person shooter that's open world as well. Far Cry 5 is one.
That's what it was. That's the only real shooter game that came out this year that I played.
Yeah. Now, that's going to be one of those interesting things. Because I agree that best shooter, some people were saying Destiny 2, and I think that I understand the idea,
it doesn't count.
that's why we have the ongoing
Yeah.
game thing. You can brag about the game that you think is still really good, but
the community's answer was Black Ops 4, which if I played that would probably be right. I played the beta, so I'm not going to count that.
yeah,
It
me
was
too.
fun for the beta. The gunplay was fun, and it's fun. This is the first yearly Call of Duty I've not been, or technically, did that game come out last year? Didn't it?
What?
No, it didn't. It came out in October. What am I thinking?
What, Black Ops 4?
Yeah, it's a very long year.
It's been a long 2 months since October.
This is the first time in probably 6 years that I've not bought a Call of Duty game at launch or in launch window. So didn't play that. So I'm glad you guys are enjoying it because the next one, we'll go ahead with yours.
Best shooter?
Yeah, Far Cry 5. That's pretty much, it has to be my answer because that's the really only, like, it's not a yearly, or not a yearly, but a, what is it called when they release content for it constantly, and it's
Games as a service.
Games as a service. It's the only not games as a service shooter game I played.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, I think the shooter I've had most fun with this year, and I honestly want y'all to understand how crazy it is that it in my mind is Destiny 2 now, because I was really just done with Destiny 2. I think we all were, and that was one of the
Destiny 2
interesting.
is obviously mine, but
That's why I think
not
that
counting
that's why I do think that it deserves a very close second in my mind, and of course your first as best ongoing game. So I think that's
so it says a lot. It says tons about the game and the current game state it's in.
Yeah. But as far as best shooter, I'm gonna have to say it's probably Far Cry 5 as well. And you know what? Honestly, solid game. I'm excited for New Dawn. I'm not necessarily excited for some of the changes they made to come back, and I hope that they make more changes.
Did you play the Moon DLC?
No.
Okay. I mean neither.
I did not know. I forgot that there was Moon DLC.
Yeah, it looks interesting.
I didn't play any of the DLC.
See, Far Cry is always hit or miss with me. Far Cry 2 was my last like masterpiece Far Cry 5 in my opinion. I mean Far Cry game.
I think 3 fits that bill.
I love 2 so much.
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love 2. I'm just saying I think 3 was the last one for me that was like the whole time I was playing it, I was like, holy crap.
Did 3 have a malaria mechanic?
Nope.
So it didn't have anything like that?
Nope.
See, that was the one thing about 2 that I was like tedious.
It was tedious, but it also felt very...
There was a lot of flaws with Far Cry 5, though. Like I will say that this game is truly on this list for me because it's the only one I really played that would classify as this
and constituted.
If I could honestly say no answer, then I'll probably have to say no answer instead of including that. But I will say Far Cry 5. Like I bought it for $60, worth the $60 for the first playthrough. There's a lot of annoying stuff in there that happens, but I do think that it's worth it if it's on sale. It's fun. Story's not half bad. Story. I know a lot of people were disappointed by that. Not me, really. I thought the story was fine, except the end. Speaking of which is why another game that's on this list is not going to make it on this list for me. But
anything else you want to say?
No, I was looking at the list. I got thrown off by how the list is made.
You're fine. I'm going to move into the next one then.
Yeah, best multiplayer.
So this one's so hard because
it had like
the reason it's so hard is because
all of them are games as a service. Well,
yeah, but even then, what I really mean is that for this year, there's not been a lot of notable new multiplayer games. This has been a very, very heavy story-driven year. I mean, you know, when you look at the PlayStation side, you had God of War, which PlayStation hardly ever puts multiplayer out anyway. But you obviously have God of War, you have Detroit, you have Spider-Man, you have things like Red Dead, and I didn't play Red Dead online, and I still haven't, so I'm not going to even talk about it. And I don't think that it's really fair to put a game that's in beta here.
Black Ops 4 also won this by community.
Black Ops 4 is our community answer.
Yeah, is our community
For
answer.
me personally, it's really hard to say because one of the only games I played that released this year multiplayer, I did not enjoy the multiplayer because it was tedious and it was only
you
for
are forgetting one major game. Monster Hunter World.
Oh my lord,
that's mine.
You are how? Yeah, I don't know why I forgot it for this category.
Yeah, that is by far the best multiplayer game that released this year.
Okay, but I want to say one thing about that. That actually was a conversation I had this morning, and it's funny being a longtime fan of Monster Hunter didn't blind me to this entirely, but it didn't make me any form of upset about it. But as soon as somebody else mentioned it, I was like, yeah, that really is I knew it to be true anyway, but it just never let it set with me that it's really a terrible part of the game. As fun of multiplayer as it is one of the most frustrating experiences to actually get into multiplayer. There's no reason that it has
very archaic.
Yeah, it's like you have to have this password. You have to log into my. And what's funny is that it's archaic in some areas and it's really cool in other ones.
Yeah,
one
it's
area
ahead
that
of its time in some areas.
One area that it does really well with in the multiplayer aspect is the idea that you can have a server. And now the server stays in its entirety as this little thing that you can roll into. And so we have a Triangle Squared server.
Yeah.
When everybody plays, like when Ryan gets on and
Which
plays.
when Frostborn, I think is what it's called, comes out, we'll probably be back on it. Because we were back on it a little bit ago.
And I'm still okay to go on it right now. I mean,
dude, that game's amazing.
But one of the things it does is that server is amazing because everybody can just hop in, and once they've joined the server, they can log into that server anytime and play. And then when you log in, they're already there and they can join into you.
They're like in your world
without you having to send a certain password or thing like that. But then the other area where it faults in so badly is that you can't, unlike, and the best way to word it, and it was Mr. Hayden, a New Zealand listener, if I recall correctly, on Facebook, he mentioned it, and he said that his buddy summed it up best. Why couldn't it have just been like Destiny 2? And now, regardless of what you think about Destiny 2, Destiny does have a very good and quick and easy way about going about co-op. You join together in a fire team, then you launch into an adventure. You know for a fact that you're starting. So what's going on in Monster Hunter that makes it so frustrating is that you both have to go into like if you want to play together, we both have to go in individually, play, see a cutscene, and then Saul, if Saul wants to stay on his, I have to leave out of mine and then join his. And I can only play with him after he's watched this cutscene.
It's a big flaw of the game. But I think that once you get past that, since you only have to really get past it the first time every time you play, in a way, like every time you hop on and you're playing with friends, you got to worry about it.
You have to get used to it. But every time you join, you still have to go through it.
That's what I'm saying. But then you're done for the rest of the session. Like as long as you're playing with friends and you don't drop out of that server session, then you're fine.
Well, no. Like I'm talking about the mission structure because you don't remember. I guess you're not.
No. The mission structure. All you had to do was go to the board and just sign on to the board.
Yeah, but what I mean by that is certain missions give you block out because of cutscenes and things like that. You don't recall that?
Well, I do. I thought you were talking about the way you start missions by joining somebody. I was like, that's not that big of a deal on me for that. But yeah, the way the mission rolls out.
Well, essentially, the game creates a bunch of faux barriers that are very odd.
Yeah.
And I think that's to its detriment. My hope is that since we live in this age of games that can be easily patched, I would hope that maybe before even, or if nothing else with Iceborne, because that is late actually. I don't remember. Iceborne is
it's like January, isn't it?
No, it's fall of next year.
Oh my gosh!
But it's supposed to be huge.
Yeah, it is.
So when you think about it in that setup, I think that the thing that the game would do to service it best would be to update that and make it to where it is a more streamlined co-op experience. I think that they would stand to gain a lot by doing so. I know some people are generally unaffected by it. So
yeah. So next up on the list. Biggest disappointment, I think this is another three-way across the board.
Yeah.
Well, hold on there. But Fallout 76.
Don't worry, Saul. The golden rule keeps it safe.
I guess so. But Fallout 76, I think everybody was pretty let down by this game in some capacity. I know we have people who are our friends on Discord that have enjoyed it. Good for you guys. I will not buy this game. I've said it before. Voting my wallet here. Will not buy this game until it's 100% fixed, and I will not pay $60 for it, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
I will not support Bethesda at a $60 price point for this game launching in the state it did. Now, I will say that, like I said, if it goes on sale and they fix the game similar to Elder Scrolls Online, there you go. However, it's not only a disappointment because of the game. It's a disappointment because of Bethesda.
I'm glad you said that.
Everything that surrounds Bethesda in this game, whether it's the new lunchboxes they're putting into the game, which is like the microtransactions from Shelter, Fallout Shelter. Then there is the canvas bag, which was the big thing there. The canvas bag propped up lawsuits, but then there was another lawsuit about you cannot release a product that's supposed to function in this form. But Bethesda really dropped the ball, and I do mean massively. So much that it has me scared for Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 in a very, very real way. And I am really not looking forward to those games. And especially since they said they're using the same engine, the engine's clunky. Everything about it is just not good. I really, really hope that they take feedback from people and they're like, listen, we took your feedback. We built a brand new engine. Hopefully it's better than this one.
My worry.
Bethesda engines are terrible half the time, 99% of the time. There's not a good Bethesda engine except the one that runs Oblivion. And I can't think of what that engine's called.
Oblivion was still messy.
I was going to say, even then, Oblivion was still pretty bad.
Because the same engine that ran Oblivion is the same engine that ran Fallout 3, which Fallout 3 was a buggy mess as well.
Skyrim too, right?
Skyrim was technically the one that we're on now. but it has foundations that are very similar to the Oblivion one.
Yeah.
It's I can't remember what it's called. The Creations. I can't remember what it's called right
Decimate
now.
Engine.
Anyway. Is that all you wanted to say about it?
Yeah, that's
because you hit on exactly what I wanted to hit on. I actually think if you want to look at the game itself, if we wanted to say the biggest disappointment, I think the game still fits the bill. But I think that more than anything, Bethesda fits the bill, and it's because of exactly what you said. I think the game has redeeming factors, and I think that, like Blake mentioned, and he agreed with me entirely. Even he gave this answer of Fallout 76, but he said that it's this weird thing where Fallout 76 itself is fun, and he said he put about 85 hours into it. That's pretty impressive considering the state of the game. But I think what that does is all it does is reinforce that the game itself has moments of fun to be had, and I think if the game would have only just come out in the state that it had, and then Bethesda wouldn't have just screwed the pooch on everything else so much more, I think that it got into this vicious cycle where you attach the Fallout 76 name to Bethesda, rightfully so, then Bethesda does something stupid in relation to Fallout 6, and then you get Fallout 6 again starts looking bad to you, which makes Bethesda look bad, which then Bethesda does something bad, which makes Fallout 6. It just becomes this vicious cycle of poorly handled game release and general community outreach and fixing things. The way that Bethesda handled all of this is just awful, and I would hope that if anything else they learn this, and even if they make a new engine, my worry about the engine itself is that, of course, I'm not happy to hear that after all this they're saying that these games are going to use this engine, but more so those games are already to some extent in development. How could they even make Starfield work on a new engine this potentially late into development? Now, the Elder Scrolls 6 has the ability, maybe since it's not even really being developed yet, it has the ability to maybe get a team working on a better engine and a newer engine, or at least a real team that's dedicated to making sure the engine they have works. Because we've seen time and again that the engine they have just does not work.
It doesn't, and there's so much wrong with it I'm sure that causes almost all the complications in the game.
Yeah, I'd be really surprised to find out that it didn't. And that's one of those things that we're left just to see what Bethesda gives us. And it looks, definitely when you look at performance and stuff like that, it's either down to lazy development or poor optimization for a bad engine. And those are what that's where you're at. Now you do have the added in idea of multiplayer being tied into this because now the game's always online and that has an impact of some sort. But ultimately, I think that Fallout 76 is the great answer for this because it's literally
the perfect answer. Like it fits every single bill.
I don't think any other game came out. It's such a disappointment. I will say the most controversial answer that I saw was Spider-Man, and it was Sean Neo.
We talked about Spider-Man enough.
I'm not going to say anything else. But I even said to him, I was like, I know that this is a controversial answer, but I agree to some extent.
To an extent. So I guess our next one up. Did you say the last one or did I?
It doesn't matter. Go ahead.
I think this is another three-way. The best art announcement. Best art direction.
I actually am going to be the outlier
really?
On this.
So the community and I are saying God of War. So I do think that God of War is a very beautiful game. The art design in it is absolutely phenomenal. It is just it's so pretty. There's things in that game that have drastic changes, such as the very beginning snowy area, then to the later areas that I'm not going to say out loud just in case. But there's dark caves, and then there's.
Look, this is what I'm going to say, and then you can finish up.
Okay.
Because it's going to let you finish off, and then I'll just say quickly why I'm torn, and I'm going to give the other one the credit just because of one particular aspect of it. Though I will say that I'm so fine with the answer of God of War to where if we just wanted to say that was the collective answer between us, I'm absolutely fine with that because, like you said, there's something about the way God of War handled it to where God of War has not only just an art direction, it has this visual direction that pulls so tightly in to where as the mood changes, the lighting changes, the outside color palettes change. And these are all things that go into art style in the direction behind those. So I think it's fair enough to say that a game like God of War not only uses its art to portray the world around it, but the way that you're perceiving the world tonally. And it does that to such great
character
effect.
Designs in that game, which technically is a component of art design.
Yeah, art design
fantastic.
is to
the
an
visuals
extent,
of the game.
Yeah.
I've heard people say that character design is not part of art design, and I'm just like, you're wrong.
I think that character design has to be part of art design because
No, it does. It does.
character design determines how the characters fit in the
I'm
world.
just telling
that
you
they
the
inhabit.
arguments I've seen, and I'm just like, y'all, you're just disagreement. But what's yours then? If it's not God of War,
Okay, well, it's we've already talked about it a little bit. It's Monster Hunter World.
that's actually Monster Hunter World is tied with number 2 for Dead Cells with me, because Dead Cells is very, very visually pleasing of a game.
It's a stunning game,
and so is Hollow Knight. But yeah, Monster Hunter World is really good.
Yeah,
Go on.
I was making sure you weren't going to say anything else. Monster Hunter, and the reason that I think that it deserves at least a very, 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 very close second to God of War is that where I think the only arguments you can really make for it against God of War is that God of War, and some of this is tied into decisions that aren't art. I mean, okay, God of War's reasoning, one of the things that helps it is the way the art flows because of a no-cut camera.
Right.
I think it's really interesting seeing the way that the art transitions as you move through with no cuts. There's nothing that acts as a solid cut of like, well, it's sunny now, and then bam, cut, the sky's red. Instead, when things get moody and the sky's red and then the thunder's bellowing in God of War, you see this general fade to it slowly happening over you because there's no camera cut. That is something that the art is benefited by, but it's not an art direction decision from the get-go.
Right.
So that's one thing I will say. The downside that I think that Monster Hunter World has against God of War is that it's not an interconnected world, and I think that that's an argument that's fair enough.
I don't even think that's a fair argument because they're two different kinds of games.
They are.
So
and that's what I was going to say. I think that if you're going off of your gut feeling, I think God of War has an upside in the fact that you view it as one continuous whole, and the world feels more connected, and that way the art feels more connected. So the art direction does have a stronger tie-in. Whereas what happens in Monster Hunter World, and why I think it's so beautiful, is that they take every single map and make sure each map feels like a very different idea of taking a biome and going to its highest of highs and its lowest of lows. So, and it's all beautiful. But they make it like, well, what's traditionally beautiful? We're going to make it very colorful and exploding.
Very colorful.
And then what's very creepy and dirty and grungy looking, we're going to pull that down. And what it does is it creates... Not only do I think that the monster designs are amazing, and I think the way they play into the world's really cool, and a lot of that ties into this is a mechanical thing to an extent, but Monster Hunter World's idea behind making sure that there's a living ecosystem also ties in that art design. They want to make sure that things that are traditionally prey for another thing is actually smaller or has some visible weakness that you can see. So the art is thought of in the sense that we're going to make sure that this design of this character makes sense as to why it would be constantly at war with this one and why it may lose. Yeah. And that these are all things that are constantly tied back in together. And I think that the idea of this hub area that's essentially the Monster Hunter World maps is that you have this area that has like a central idea, and then it kind of just goes off, and like I said, it's so natural and so beautiful and so flowing, and I think that the game deserves every bit of credit in making sure that if nothing else, I think that game's art design has the most alive feeling world of any game I've played this year, and it's not only because of art, it's because of other things, but the art definitely ties into it, and how it just feels like a whole. And I mean, that goes from every single aspect of the game, from the way that the dirt looks, the way the ground looks, the way the grass is animated, the way the enemies and stuff move throughout that, and the way that the enemies' color palettes go again.
Especially, I can't think of the name of the area, but it's like the gassy one.
It's like the Rotten Vale.
Yeah,
the Rotten Vale is beautiful.
Sick.
And that's what I was going to say is like, that's where art design and I think character design and monster design all come together. The monsters themselves, they have this really genius thing where essentially what you're going to fight in any given area and why they seem to be a little more often, you're normally going to fight a monster in one particular map. And now you can sometimes see them in other maps, but they'll try and keep them. Which is also
really cool.
Yeah. But essentially what happens, at least the first time you're rolling through the game, like when you fight a Rathalos, he's up in the top and he's high, and he himself is this great, really colorful, vibrant
dragon,
and
he's up on a peak, which will then transform you'll basically leave that area to follow him either down a waterfall or down a forest.
Yeah, and now what I mean by that is like they keep this color palette around him, so he's in a vibrant area. They make him vibrant. When you go to the Rotten Vale, think about everything you fight in the Rotten Vale. All of its color palettes are met into that muted, weird color tone that's in there.
Yeah,
and they have that green thing. So the design
thing.
the effuvium or whatever, the gas.
Yeah. And then you go down further and turn the corner. There's like that spring almost of like that. It's like really blue water, and
it creates this really cool contrast, and it serves to, when you hit that, you kind of have this instant relief without even having to think about it, that this is like, oh, we're in a different area, we're safe. We're not in the effuvium. We can breathe, you know. And I think that world just becomes so believable in the way that they break everything up, and that they use the color tones in a very different way than God of War, where everything's connected. Instead, they want it to feel connected within itself. Right. So every hub map feels like its own whole world. Yeah, if that's the best way to describe it.
It makes perfect sense.
And that game has just got so much lush, like
all the environments are just, you know what, you're convincing me. It's like, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, man,
like the foliage in that game is so beautiful and organic, and
that's the best looking multiplayer game I've ever played.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's very rare that you get a multiplayer game like this that has this much attention to detail, the color, and then just the overall quality of the graphics.
You experience all together. Yeah.
And that's it nails it perfectly.
Yeah.
So you know what? I'm gonna tie it. God of War and Monster Hunter World.
Bam.
We got God of World. Hunter.
Monster
War.
Oh, yeah, I can't figure it out. That's probably a good one. All right, this one was really surprising, and the community answer was surprising. So the topic or the category, Saul's ruining our tree.
Sorry.
Anyway, the category is best new IP, and the community answer was surprisingly Detroit Become Human.
That's not mine.
I'm not saying that it should be, but is that not kind of surprising? Because I will say this: the game was enjoyable. I thought that it did a really good job. It sold well enough to be a new IP. It was refreshing in a year full of stuff like Spider-Man and God of War and things that we already knew to some extent. But I actually think that, as good as it was, I think that indie games, in a weird way, actually overshadowed this.
Yes, it did.
In a sense of, and now that's interesting. Do we want to consider best indie game? And I'm still going to go with best new IP, and those indie games are IPs as well. So, like, one thing that's going to be excluded is obviously Guacamelee 2, which was good, not as good as the first one, it feels like. But as far as new IP, I think Detroit's a good answer. But what would you say falls in line as yours? And I'm going to run through and look at my trophies real quick to make sure I'm not forgetting anything.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think through my head right now. I'll put an announcement in Discord that this will be late. So again, we apologize because we're 20 minutes away from the original airtime, and it takes almost an hour to put this up. So we'll be a little late. But I'm trying to think. So I'm probably going to go with Dead Cells. But I feel like there's something else in the back of my mind that should count. Like, I know I wish Monster Hunter technically would count. Like, if that game was called World, then yeah. But because it's not really a Monster Hunter game, so then therefore it's a new IP.
Yeah, I get what you're trying to say.
It feels so different as a Monster Hunter game. I mean, because God of War doesn't count. Spider-Man technically doesn't count, right? Like, I mean,
No, Spider-Man is an existing franchise. I'm thinking off from the ground up, an entirely brand new experience that you played.
I'm going to have to go with Dead Cells. Once again, this comes down to Dead Cells and Hollow Knight.
I know mine.
What is that? Oh, I know it too, I think.
What? See how well you know me.
I'm trying to think of the name of it now because I can picture it perfectly in my head.
Okay, what's it look like?
Oh, my goodness. No, I'm trying to name it. I'm trying to think.
Well, Saul,
I know it's an indie game.
No, it's not an indie game.
Oh, it's not?
Nope.
What is it then?
It's a AA game.
Oh, Vampire.
Yeah, Vampire.
Vampire
is definitely mine. Now that I'm actually thinking about it, I think that for as much as Detroit did interesting, Bloodborne. Yeah, no, I think that for all of its faults that it really does have, just by nature of it being a AA game, it overcame every bit of those and was still incredibly fun and unique and a weird experience that I really truly enjoyed, and I would be interested to actually see if it would continue. I think that it's ripe for continuation, but also if it doesn't, it's a really good one-off. My basic reasoning is that it did, again, like I said, a year full of games that take the Dark Souls idea and try and change it a bit, and this game did do that with specifically blood, and I like that idea. It was like, okay, you're going to get blood, and you're going to use this blood to level up. And change the way that you go through these skill trees. But the biggest thing that I actually think was really ambitious about it is the way that I say I can never imagine a AAA game doing this because it's such an odd thing to try and pull off. And they didn't do it perfectly, but nobody else has ever done it before necessarily. And that's the idea that you have these subsections of the map, right? And you move throughout them or whatever, where they're essentially little villages or whatever you want to call them. They're not villages. I can't think of them. But the regions of the map are broken up, and those regions have an individual list where you can actually go through and you can look at who lives there and what your relationship with them, if they're healthy, if they're mad at you or whatever. You can go through all that, and you can sit there and you can actually try and make sure that you keep that section of the map clear, which will help them stay in better health. If you don't keep it clear, it continues to start running down, and that changes visually the ideas. The further it goes towards chaos, the more boarded up windows and evacuated sense there is, and that's all controlled by how many people live or how many people die and how much sickness is out there. You can keep everybody alive by helping them as you are a doctor in the game, so you can actually sit there and help them and give them medicine and give them stuff like that.
It's almost like soul sacrifice in a way, right? Like you could pick to save, or technically not really save.
I mean, I think if you're talking about the general idea of what soul sacrifice was doing, where you're going to make the general decision as to whether and BioShock did it to an extent, but far more limited, where it's like, well, all you have is the little sisters. Are you going to sacrifice or are you going to save her? And I think that you've seen that evolve to an extent. Again, even soul sacrifice was only certain things. On this, every single NPC has lines of dialogue, relationships with other ones. You can find out tricks about them and stuff like that, and how you can actually go about killing them without being seen. When you kill them, you hear their last thoughts, and you can determine whether or not you really should have or not. And sometimes, like, you play this game with yourself where it's like, it's beneficial to me to kill them because I'll get more blood, but that makes the areas more dangerous,
right?
And
makes the people around you hate you,
and it potentially closes down side quests. But so you kind of do this idea where you're like, how evil are they? How much do they truly deserve this death? At least that's how I did it, and I really enjoyed that idea and that extra layer of gameplay.
That choice,
that's
pretty cool.
Of letting every NPC have a real potential to do something, and then you actually get to go through, talk to all of them, and if you talk to them enough, you can determine easy ways to kill them, or if they have information that's worth keeping them alive. And then also how you want to play. Do you want to be an evil vampire and kill a bunch of people to feed your bloodlust, or do you want to fight it?
Yeah, and I think mine will be a tie between Hollow Knight and Dead Cells. If I'm going,
I still think you need to play Vampire at some point.
Yeah,
if you ever get a chance,
didn't you?
Yeah,
I'm about to see if it's on sale because I'll play it today or tonight if it is. But if I had to edge one out, I'd probably say Hollow Knight, just because over Dead Cells, higher quality, more of an experience.
Yeah,
but still, I like them both equally, but because what they are. It's just hard, man. It's like you ask me that question on any given day, it could change. So I don't want to do any kind of ties. And I just looked at my trophies again. I have no new IPs at all this year except like 3. And
there's
one
very
of which
few.
I did not like.
Yeah, and that's why I'm glad I thought to look at Vampire, because I really did enjoy that game. But there's something about getting a camera on you and being on the spot where you're like, I really want to make sure I don't forget something that I loved. And I sung Vampire's praises a lot before the game even came out, and then I was so glad that it was one of those examples where it was a game that I got hyped for, and it didn't let me down. It actually exceeded my expectations, and that's cool.
That is cool. That's good too for a AA almost budget game in a way.
Yeah, and I think you'll be surprised that when you go to play it, there's this level. They did a lot as a AA game. They strike this thing between being as detailed as a AAA game in some areas, and then sadly falling victim to some normal AA problems. But I think what they exceed in massively is general world design and mood. I think that I've seen very few games that encapsulate the tone and mood of the world. Like, it's very moody, and when you're moving through, it's like, oh man, there's like, there's scribbling on the doors and stuff. Like when you're moving through, I'm actually trying to think. It's more than just mood. I'm trying to think of the wording I would really use. But you can really feel it when you're moving around. It's like it's got such a weight to everything and the way that they choose to do it.
I'm gonna go look.
What do they call it whenever it's the essence of when you're in there? I don't know why I'm brain farting on that. No, not the aesthetic. But oh well. I mean, regardless, play Vampire if you haven't. It's really good. I think you would enjoy it. If you like what I said, if that even sounds loosely fun to you, try and catch it. Even if it's on sale, do one of those. Catch it for $30 or less if it gets to that point. And it's sold well enough that I think we actually may see more from them.
And no, it is $60 on the PlayStation Store.
Sadly, huh? Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's worth $60, but
I was really hoping to pick it up for a sale.
But hey, look at GameStop, man. Later.
That's true.
I mean, I know you like doing but if nothing else, hey, if you don't like it, you trade it in, then you're out of less money.
Yeah, I guess that's true too. This next one I'm gonna let you do because I don't have an answer for.
Really?
VR.
Yep.
I never played a VR game this year.
Yeah, you didn't play any. You didn't even get around the firewall like I kept wanting you to do.
Not one.
All right, community answers Moss, which I think is a great answer, really good one. My personal answer, and it'll be quick, short, and sweet. I will say real quick, I did not get to play Astrobot VR, and I have it, and I just haven't had the time to pull it in. So that game is going to be omitted from me, though I do think it looks amazing. Mine's Firewall 0 Hour.
I thought it was going to be that Justin Roiland game.
Oh, no, that one was fun, and I like those games, but they are a little different. You play them kind of once. You may go back to them again, but they're more about the immediate experience and the fun you have with them, and you probably remember it. But the thing about Firewall is I remember my first time playing, but I continue to have fun every time I play it. Yeah, and I also think that it's truly, like we talk about, like Resident Evil was a true example of what VR can really do. I think that that's exactly what we got with Firewall, and I hope that it continues to grow and becomes the Rainbow Six of VR. Yeah. That would be very smart of them to do because there's very little competition in that area. So,
best soundtrack community is Red Dead 2, which I know a lot of people were hit or miss on with that. I know it has a lot of good and unique music. Once again, I didn't play a lot, never got back onto it like I wanted to, which is very surprising that you beat it. I did not. We switched roles there.
Yep.
In a way, but for me, unexpectedly, God of War. I don't know about you.
No, God of War is real high up there.
Or not, I should say not unexpected.
I think God of War is truly my answer as well. My barometer for this tends to be, did I ever listen to it outside of the game?
See, I've only done that with like a handful of games throughout my entire life.
Sure, but God of War is one of them. Surprisingly, I actually listened to the soundtrack. I listen to it every month or so, at least once, and I listened to it a lot closer to when the game came out.
There's just something about the drums and then the Nordic vocals that game has that's like the doom. I'm not gonna do it because I'm terrible at mimicking music, but it puts you in the mood. Like it's like you hear that and it's just like you hear them drums echoing and it's like, oh yeah.
And I think
it hypes you up real good.
I think that's why the community answer is Red Dead, because the reason Red Dead is not it for me is that it's outside of the song that they played at the Game Awards, the official Game Awards, and I can't remember the name of it for the life of me.
At the Game Awards for Red Dead?
Yeah, it was. It's very late in the Red Dead game, and in the placing where it's at in the game, it is very appropriate. It's got a lot of weight. It holds way more meaning. But it's one of these very odd things where the rest of the game has that soundtrack that is exactly what you would expect in terms of it feels appropriate and it feels like you're in the right mood and time period. Like, you hear like the kind of folky,
like the twang on the guitars.
Yeah, and you're like, okay,
the banjos in a way.
Yeah, it's like, okay, this is fitting. This feels right, and it gets me in the mindset and mood of being in this time period, which I think is a fair enough argument as to why I think God of War is really good as well. But I think what happens is that, for me, the only time that the Red Dead soundtrack elevates to being so much more and adding to the specific scene is that one song. Whereas God of War does that
whole thing
the whole time through. Every scene gets so much more weight specifically because of the soundtrack and what they chose to do. And I mean, the sad moments have this decidedly, it's like a haunting sound from, I can't remember the name of that instrument. I know it's like a hurdy-gurdy or something ridiculous like that. Don't quote me on that, but it's something ridiculous like that. And it's an instrument that you kind of see in Sea of Thieves, the little one where you wind on it and play. It's got this like weird resonance.
Well, when we play Sea of Thieves tonight, I'm going to play that then.
Yeah, it's got a weird resonance to it that's really, it's like hollow but full all at the same time, and it creates this like haunting sound.
Yeah.
And so I think that the game used that to such a good effect, and I think that Bear McCreary, which was the soundtrack, what do you want to call it, the director or whatever for that. Anyway, when you actually look at that, the composer, thank you.
I was like,
anyway,
director?
For him being a composer and what he chose to do, he's known for using that instrument, and I think that by doing something that's a little more out of the blue and different, it's a lot like, I think there's, why Nier Automata stands out is that not only is Nier Automata really interesting, but
the soundtrack for that game. That's one of the soundtracks I've listened to outside of the game,
and it's so amazing. Yeah,
it is.
But there's the chaos language and how they choose to use it as a melody tool instead of actually a lyrical tool.
Yeah,
is really interesting to me, and that is something that elevates the game above normal music. And I think that it's fair enough to say that in a year that we had, I mean, Spider-Man's soundtrack was very similar in the sense that it was very on the top with Marvel. Yeah, it just fit in with what you expected from Marvel.
It was a good soundtrack. It was really good. Just not as good as God of War, not as good as what I played of Red Dead, and it's just there's even stuff in Hollow Knight, and I played a little bit of Celeste too. All that stuff there is better than what I consider Spider-Man to be, because Spider-Man's very typical. But in the same vein of soundtrack, best sound design, which Community wins God of War. That's not my answer.
I'm really curious on yours.
Do you have one? Is it God of War?
I think if we want to go in the full-on AAA space, God of War makes a lot of sense.
It does, and that's why it's my close second. Monster Hunter World being my first.
I had a feeling,
I
think that for the same reason I talk about being split between the two.
Yeah,
the sound design also aided in the sense that every area that you're in was alive. Whereas one of the things that God of War does is that God of War doesn't feel alive because you go through a lot of areas that feel rightfully abandoned. Because of where you're at, you're in the middle. Like, not even abandoned. Like you feel like you're in places that have no civilization or no. But even to an extent, just
the
wildlife seems absent.
And what?
In God of War.
Oh, okay.
That's what I mean. Like God of War feels barren and like a harsh waste, like a harsh environment that you don't. That for some reason, like you don't. Until you get into the open area of God of War, there's not even a lot of wildlife. So the sound design is a lot more in the weight of like you throwing your axe and the enemy sounds and the voice acting, obviously. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that. And if we want to go off of voice acting alone, I think God of War's probably got, and I will actually give Red Dead its credit here. I think Red Dead also has supremely voice acted sections. And I'm so glad that gaming's gotten to this point where everything is elevated to a point where it's what you expect from movies, if not even better sometimes.
Most definitely better sometimes.
So I think that in that area, there's a lot to be said. But if we want to talk about the way that the sound helps flesh out the world, I do think that there's quite the argument specifically for Monster Hunter World. So I kind of agree, because Monster Hunter World's voice acting,
all the monsters,
is not amazing.
No.
It's exactly what you expect from a Japanese game.
Yeah,
I mean it's okay. It's solid, but it's not great.
But the environments, environments like waterfalls, the effervescent things that not effervescent, but it's those things. And all the monsters with all having unique sounds, steps, everything is absolutely phenomenal. So,
I think
God of War being very close second.
I agree that it's an odd split, and I may even say that for me personally, it might be a tie.
God of War does something really, really well that is something I pay attention to in games. I don't know if a lot of people do this or not, but I think it's a weird quirk that I have. Maybe completely normal. But whenever I'm like playing in a game for the first time, like God of War, I'm looking at where my feet are. And I'm listening to see if the sound changes if I step from like wet sand onto wood or something.
Yeah.
And God of War did that
really
surprisingly, like not surprisingly, but amazingly well.
Though I want to give credit there as well to Monster Hunter World, because Monster Hunter pays attention to that to a good extent.
It does.
Too. When you start stepping in mud, it feels squishy.
And even
it sounds
this is
squishy.
off sound design, but even character model seems to slug or something when you go through that.
Yeah.
Even when it's not deep mud.
It's about how all these elements tie together. But yeah, definitely I think to some extent those make sense to me. And I would actually give a real nod toward Red Dead. I think Red Dead does deserve nomination, mention, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting down close to the nitty-gritty here. Next up is Best Metroidvania. This is a year that came out with a ton of Metroidvanias.
Ton.
It's one of those things where, like we've mentioned, Dead Cells is not a true Metroidvania, but I don't feel like, we mentioned this in the Discord the other day, I don't feel like any genre is truly that genre anymore. I think if you really want to go into the definition of what makes an RPG, almost every game these days, technically speaking, is an RPG. And this actually stemmed from some website giving, and I don't know if it was a community or not. It was essentially saying that the best RPG of the year was Detroit Become Human.
Nope.
And some people were laughing at it. But you know what? Realistically speaking, out of every game that came out this year,
it's not sad. It's not silly to think of that as an RPG.
And not at all. I mean, honestly, it is the game that most put you in the role of somebody. You are literally role playing.
Well, the problem I have with that though is that typically I'm not role playing the person. Because I see things that they don't see. So I feel like that's a big problem. There's like a gap there. There are times in which you will find things, or you'll see characters do something, or you'll realize it, and like.
But your character's technically facing away.
Yeah,
he wouldn't be seeing him.
Exactly.
And there's a disconnect.
So there's a big disconnect there for me.
I can see that.
But that's, Hollow Knight.
So would you say that role playing games for you to be truly feeling like you're role playing need to be first person?
No. It's just don't like if you're gonna make obtuse observations like that and then have me use them out of, or if you expect me to make obtuse observations and then make decisions with them in the game, if my character doesn't see them, there's a problem. There's a disconnect.
Well,
there.
see, I don't feel like Detroit did that. I feel like Detroit would let you see them away from that, but you could always steer your character toward them and then discover them with your character, and that was the idea. You connect with the character in a sense where you notice it from the outward, but then you turn around and you can go and experience it.
There's one or two things in Marcus's story that was like, there's no way Marcus should have known that, but I know that. I can't think of what they are, but I know for a fact.
Fair enough. Yeah, I've been a little removed. I've been removed from it myself. So.
I actually forgot a lot about that game.
But anyway, best Metroidvania. The answer for the community was a tie between Hollow Knight and Dead Cells.
Hollow Knight wins for me, without a doubt.
I didn't play Hollow Knight, so
it's a true Metroidvania that wins.
Dead Cells wins for me because I didn't play Hollow Knight.
Hollow Knight is
true
to its bones.
You've never played Guacamelee at all, right?
Nope.
Okay. Guacamelee 2 was a solid game. It was really fun. It was really good. It just felt a tad bit uninspired because it was more of a refinement on the previous game. And even though it was really fun and really solid, just like I expected from the first game, I think that Dead Cells' take on it, and I really do think it's the way that Dead Cells... I like the Metroidvania style games anyway, but I think Dead Cells specifically speeding it up a whole lot and making it feel like it was Twitch-based made me really like it, because the other one that I think that a lot of people have mentioned, and a couple people voted for it, was Time Spinners. And Time Spinners was far more traditional.
See, I never played it. I know you recommended it.
Yeah, it was slower, a little more plotting, and a little more like you don't have a lot of different combos and attacks. Like you have a couple of different weapons, and they react the same way every time you do it. Much like Symphony of the Night. When you throw your whip out,
I love it.
You know what your whip's going to do. Yep. It's the exact same every time. And I think that while I love that because it creates a confidence in what you're going to do when you respond.
Of course.
And I think that exists in Dead Cells through its jumping system. I think that... you know what you're doing when you're in your movement, but they change the weapons up to an extent where the weapons have such a different effect on what they're going to do. Definitely with the random rolls, like, well, you're going to get a weapon that when you swipe it, it's going to throw out a blast and then shoot an arrow upwards and to the right. And it's like, well, you're going to have to really pay attention and change the way that you play based off of this. There's also a melee. You have a secondary, so you can have not only your main weapon, but you can have a secondary, be it a bow or spells or whatever. And then you have mines that you can play with and things that are more. So I think what it did to expand on that within the same style of gameplay was cool to me, and that's why it stands out as my favorite.
That makes sense. Hollow Knight just hit it all to a T to me. The whole finding an area, then backtracking to access it later.
When I finally play Hollow Knight, I will check back in and tell you if my answer has changed.
Okay. But yeah, Hollow Knight, I think you guys would have guessed that. Next up, we have Best of the Backlog. This is the game that didn't have to come out this year, but something you finally got around to playing.
Well, actually, essentially the idea behind this was a couple of people mentioned it, and I like the idea of going, you didn't, this is a game that came out last year, would have gotten awards last year, or even older, and you're just now getting around to it. And what game was the most mentioned? Now, of course, the problem with this is backlogs are so wildly different, and they could be from any year that you never know what game's going to come up. But surprisingly...
Mine was Majora's Mask. No. Yeah, the community's was Horizon Zero Dawn.
Which is interesting.
Understandable to an extent.
And that was the only game that had multiple answers. Every other one was one-offs.
Which is crazy. Mine, though, is Enter the Gungeon.
Oh, man. You know what?
Game. Is that yours too?
Yes.
Yeah, dude. Enter the Gungeon is such a good game. Amazing. It's another game that I bought on PS4 and on Switch to play just on the couch when I don't want to, like when I watch Netflix or whatever. So Enter the Gungeon is a fantastic game. If you are a fan of Binding of Isaac, or if you even like the idea of a completely randomly generated dungeon to go through, and you can play as a bullet as a character.
And if you like gun humor.
Yeah, dude. There's a lot of it's just as humorous of a. What was that?
It was the fire.
Oh, okay. The fire's blowing up behind us. But I thought like that was your window or something. But anyways, sorry for the audio only listeners who didn't see the fire behind us.
If I knew that it was going to distract you so much, I wouldn't have put it on, Saul.
It didn't distract me at all until then. But yeah, Enter the Gungeon for sure. That's a good answer.
Yeah, that one's really solid. What's funny is I forgot that that's actually what I played this year because it was so early in the year. But I really enjoyed my time with that game. It was really, really amazing. Yeah. And I've not really played a lot of backlog otherwise.
Me neither.
I haven't had a chance to.
Yeah, I've pretty much been playing games as they come out, plus Destiny.
I have one. I have one that I think I will at least give notable because it really did surprise me, and that is Mirror's Edge Catalyst. I really didn't expect to. I bought it just off a weird whim, and I was like, surely I'll like it a little bit. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't
and you
perfect.
Got it for like a really low price too, didn't you?
$6.
Yeah, that's a steal.
So I mean, really, but I still think Enter the Gungeon's my real answer. But that one is notable answer.
I think this is another 3-way tie or 3-way win.
Best narrative?
Yep.
Easily.
God of War for the community, me and Brett. With Red Dead 2 edging very close to being the winner. I think we were only off by a couple votes there, if my math's right. Like 2, I think.
Yeah, it was very close.
1 or 2 votes on that. So as you guys can tell, we've gushed about God of War enough. I think you guys know it's good. We like it.
Yeah, because we don't. The thing about getting in the narrative.
It's crazy about the next one too.
Really, and that's really funny. But the thing about the narrative, specifically in God of War, is that we want to talk about it to some extent, and I think we've talked enough about it in talking about Atreus and character interactions as to why I think it's so important, and the fact that we talked about every character's used to good point. But essentially, the narrative itself is driven by these characters and driven by. I mean, really, I want to say the narrative is driven by the characters in a way that is really surprising. Because the narrative is there, but it all ties into character interactions. I mean, the whole game is built upon this, and built about along this idea that these characters interacted, so this is going to happen. You're going to continue, be it from the earliest interactions of the handprint on the tree, right?
Yeah.
That the character interaction between the tree and what the trees meant from when they knew they were going to do that, and then of course carrying it back with a trace and all the character actions that go there. The character actions are what they use to drive you through the map early on until you get to the meat of what's going on, so that then you have a greater idea.
It's a big chunk to bite.
Realistically speaking, you have a bigger idea, but from the very beginning of the game, you know that what the character interaction that's driving you throughout the entire game is literally just the mission to carry your mother's ashes. And I love the idea that that's going to be the whole game. You don't lose the forest for the trees in this game.
No.
There's other stuff that happens, and it's arduous to get there, but in the long run, the grand ending and idea of this game is that you make it to this mountain the whole time. That was what you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And you get there. And I don't even think that's spoiler. I love that the game is that focused and that, yes, other things are going to come up and we're going to have to deal with them. But ultimately, they're in service in getting to this original end goal.
Yeah, that's what the best part about this experience is. It's such a simple task to walk to this mountain, and yet this whole entire story, action, emotional feelings, all of it transpires from just that one. Supposed to be simple thing to do, and yet it all spirals out into this fantastic package.
And I think that also ties in the narrative of this was literally all in the mother's plan.
Yep.
And I think that's what I think is so amazing. That's not spoiler. You essentially roll through the game and you start to realize that this was all because she was going to die no matter what. So essentially now it's about making sure that Kratos and Atreus can find a way to live with each other and grow together.
And find some things out as well.
Yeah.
Which do happen and really cool.
Best performance, and I actually have a slightly different answer for this one, but the best performance for the community is Roger Clark. Arthur Morgan is who he was portraying in Red Dead Redemption 2, and I think that's a very, very honorable answer. I mean, I like I said, I was genuinely surprised by how much I ended up liking him. And a lot of that came down to not only solid writing for him, but very, very good performance. And good, kudos to him. And I'm glad I'm okay with him winning. The thing, what would you say is your best performance?
Jeremy Davies, Baldur.
Again.
Like I said before or earlier in this show, when he arrives in the first 15 minutes to an hour of the game, from then on his character is nothing but I want to see. Every time I see him, I'm excited to see him because I'm like, this dude's crazy. This dude's a really, really well made bad guy. I'm excited. So, and
again, I think that it comes down to, like I said, God of War is literally a game full of well-written characters.
Yeah.
So and not only well-written characters but well-performed characters. They made sure that they made great scripts for what they were going to be doing, but they chose people to execute those scripts perfectly. But I think I agree. I do think it may come back to my general idea of a good bad guy, because a part of what sells a good bad guy, regardless of good writing, because that is part of it. That's most of the battle. But once you have a great script and a great way to try and make your bad guy likable and to an extent and relatable, you have to make them somebody. You have to give it to somebody who can play that entire emotional spectrum. And that's exactly what happens with Baldur.
Yep.
And I think that's awesome. I mean, it
is. He. If I have to say, like, he's within my top 5 to 10 favorite bad guys of all times in video games.
Yeah, I mean, he's really up there, because it's funny, you have other series that are known for a long time of this idea that they're going to have these great characters, like Uncharted's one of them, and yet Lazarevich is one of the worst villains in a video game I've ever had. That was a bad guy for Uncharted 2. I bet you probably didn't even remember that.
I didn't even remember his name, but I remember what he looked like.
Because he's not a good villain.
And it's another thing when the game outshines the bad guy so well, because it's such a well-made game, and the bad guy's so poorly written, or just not even, I'm not gonna say poorly written, but just wrongly written in a way. Like it deserves something better.
Well, what's funny is that game suffers from this idea that actually the bad guy, the friend in the early thing that ends up screwing you over, Flynn, he's actually a better villain, but he doesn't get to play a big enough part.
Yeah, well, never mind.
I won't go too far.
I'm not going to go too far into it either.
It's one of those interesting things where I think that it stands above the rest because there's a number of great villains. I mean, there's a number of great heroes, right? And I do think that Christopher Judge's Kratos was extremely well done.
That's my number 2. Christopher Judge, it was a fantastic Kratos. I like that guy personally. Like, that guy is a nice guy. He just seems like he has a heart full of gold. And especially at the Game Awards, like the whole Read It Boy thing was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I like that they pay attention. You can tell that people like it.
You can tell they enjoy doing it.
Yeah. I do generally want to say one last answer, and I'm curious as where you think, because I actually think that we agreed when the game first came out. I do think that there should be some notable mention of Connor and Detroit Become Human. I think that he is easily the best performed character of the 3, and they're all well done. But I think the reason his is also there is because we talked about that emotional spectrum. And his is exaggerated because of the fact that he's supposed to be a robot.
Yeah.
So what makes his performance so amazing, and it depends on how you play the game, truly, but I would say if you're going to play the game, at some point in time, play him as a good person.
Yeah.
Who's selfless. And just start to figure it out, because you have this weird thing where you're playing as him and you have this understanding of, like, he's meant to be this true good. And what makes it so great is that throughout the events of the game, he's not supposed to be the true good. I'm sorry, he's supposed to be this true... we want to call it. He's supposed to be the true embodiment of order.
Yeah, he's supposed to be.
Androids are supposed to be androids, and they're supposed to be subservient to their humans, and they're not supposed to go AWOL and go crazy and live their own lives. Good. So what ends up happening is he's fitting this very reasonable role of what you're thinking of, like, okay, well, he fits in this way, and he almost comes off cold early on.
He does come off very cold, especially the very first thing you do with him, the very first mission, which was the demo, is very cold of a person. He does not care about anybody there. He's literally an android. But by the end,
and everything he's saying is in the it's just an error.
Lawful good.
It's just an error in your coding. You are not supposed to be acting this way.
And the guy that
the human's more important. Save the human. And even early on, the game lets you try and be a little less cold with him. But there always is this back end of he truly believes that this android is in the wrong.
Right.
And then throughout the game, depending on how you play him, you get to see this odd, like, his eyes slowly opening. And I think that's a lot of what makes his performance so well is how well the performance plays off of Clancy
Brown.
Yeah, who is Hank in the game, which is his officer person that he gets coupled up with. And I think that there's a lot to be said about the way they play together. And those are two great actors, and they get to grow in a way that makes their character interactions by the time they get to the end feel so much more deserved and earned. And
except when you get my ending.
Yeah.
I got literally the worst ending of the game, which is why I didn't make it on the list.
Because Saul did not pay attention to any of the rest of the game.
Me and my fiance were both playing. We could not find it at all. We were like running around that snow area. Anyways, Brian Deckert, the guy who voiced and mocapped Connor, really cool guy. He's constantly on Twitter promoting his Twitch streams and stuff. So I highly suggest you guys check him out.
Yep.
So
move through the end of this here, and
it's going to be very easy to do so.
Yeah, but I have one final thing that's going to take a little bit of time, and it's about Red Dead, and that's something I just really want to get out there, and it's the reason as to why it's not something, but we'll get into it. First things first, Santa Monica is the studio of the year, the community answer, and I'm gonna follow that. I think that they are, and I think that a big reason I saw, and for me personally, and a big reason I saw for many people, is partially because of how everybody for the studio came out and were so likable. That's in things like making the God of War memes of common TV shows, like the kids sitting at the computer giving us thumbs up, and it was Atreus, and then. I mean, they making Kratos Ron from Parks and Rec. And then the magic Freya thing with the
Freya.
Yeah.
Never mind. I keep getting her confused with somebody else in that game.
Anyway,
I did that a lot.
Yeah, I know where you're trying to go because Freya is the mother, right?
I'm not talking about Freya though.
Oh, not Faye. It's Faye. I'm sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, I did the same thing as you.
You just did it. I got.
I'm sorry. Yep. Okay. Anyway, but no. My point being is, I think there's that, and I think that Corey came out as such a likable and heartfelt person. I think a lot of things aided them in that. He filmed his reaction to the game's reviews, and it was really, you could tell it was touching to him truly.
He was very teared up.
And he's been out. He went on a tour going around and talking about the game, and it was obvious that he had just finally gotten to make something that he was just so incredibly proud of because it was super personal, and he didn't get to. It wasn't like that before, and I think it was also for him. You got to see him physically show his his evolution as a writer, because he worked on God of War 2 and he did the story for God of War 2, but the story between God of War 2, which is a great game, and I love the game and I love the story, but between this, it's night and day, and you see how much he's grown as not only an artist but as a writer and as a director, and making sure that he narrows down his scope of what he wants and gets it as close as the original vision he had was. I think that's definitely part of it. So Saul, do you have a different answer, or is that
No, that's mine. And pretty much you hit the nail on the head there.
Okay, the last one, and I'm going to let you go off on that one, and then
I'm going to go ahead and say this. I know this is a 3 tie now.
Yes, it is,
because of the addendum you just had to make for yourself a second ago. But so game of the year, the big one, through the community, Brett and I, but Brett's going to have some words to say about reasoning why, is God of War. So we've spoken about this game a lot already in this episode, so you guys can tell we've gushed about it. It's won numerous awards from us because we're so famous they matter a lot, about things or through awards in here, and we've talked about it a lot. We have impressions videos up if you guys want to get our week-old impressions of the game right after we beat it, because there is complaints in there that I still have to this day that are about some of the pacing issues, and it's not even necessarily pacing, it's about the length of the game. I felt like the game was a little too long and drawn out, but I do think that there's a testament there that even though that's a problem I had with Spider-Man as well, that God of War made all these awards and lists because of the amazing writing, the amazing characters, the world building, and not only on top of that, but it's such a fantastic and just spectacular package that the flaws in that game were very easily ignorable.
The flaws almost became this character to it. Yeah. It's it's just got a little charm and character here of you view the flaws in a more positive light because
of how the positive the entire game experience was.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting thing. And I think that to some extent I have similar feelings with Red Dead, but there's a big reason as to why Red Dead is not it. And it comes down to a lot of areas. The same reason I talked about, and these are just quick mentions, but the same reason I talked about God of War and its narrative and pacing issues as to why I think Spider-Man doesn't deserve a narrative mention. Those same things exist in Red Dead. And a lot of that comes down to one specific idea and or one specific problem I have with the game, and I finally was able to really figure out the way I wanted to try and word it. I thought about this a lot last night because it's the same thought I've had on the game since I beat it, and I've said this in some form and extent to Blake because he was so hyped on it, and so he was constantly asking me about it, and I finally found a way to vocalize what I really mean by this. The game is a story of 2 games and 2 different ideas of one studio that refuses to go one way or the other. And that's specifically Rockstar's... Essentially what I want to get here with it is that Rockstar did one specific thing in the design for this game. They did not decide to glue one way or the other to what type of game they wanted to make. Instead, you get a game that when you're playing it as a linear game and just rolling through the story without doing any of the side crap, it's great. Yep. Outside of the fact that you have to run everywhere, that's the only part that starts to make it feel disjointed. But it plays, if you're just playing the story, as this amazing linear experience that almost I actually do think would have been better as just a linear game, more akin to something like The Order. Now, that is so contrasted in the way that they choose to go about the open world. So this is a game that, in one sense, the story mission sense, does not want to let you do anything that the game does not want you to do.
Yeah.
And that means that if you run a slightly different direction than they think you do, if you run too quickly away from somebody who's trying to talk to you, you fail the mission because of stupid reasons.
That's very common Rockstar.
And you don't even get to do the missions in the way you think. So you think, well, this is a story mission that has to be done, but maybe I have some agency over the way that I'm going to do it, right? So when you think about it in that sense, there's other games that do this very similarly. So you have a game like Dishonored.
Yeah.
Dishonored's a game where it's here's the answer of what you have to be done, and this is a mission that you have to do, but you have an endless ways to get to it and accomplish the goal. Whereas what Red Dead does is goes, no, we're trying so hard to tell you a story. We want to make sure these things get shown. So instead, to make sure these really, really important story beats get handled the way that we think they should be handled, we're going to knock it down, and you can't do anything. You know, if you have to break into somewhere, you can only break in via one door. There's not multiple doors. You have to go in through this door, and there's a specific reason you have to go in through this door because it's going to trigger this cutscene.
It's
closed off.
Yeah, I was going to say very straightforward on a path.
Yes, and that is
to the outside structure of
and
the
that's
game.
in such stark contrast to what they want you to do in the open world, which is to do everything the way you think it should be done, be it hunting, camping, or anything.
Free reign there, but then when you get into the story, it locks you down to this specific way that it wants you to move, and that it wants you. This is very common Rockstar traits we're talking about here that has been present in every Rockstar game.
The game that I can remember it most loosely, I think Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories was the last time, and then that also extends to 3 because they're very similar in their design. Both of those games allowed you to play the game and even do the story missions in ways you saw fit. It was less constricting. But as they've gotten to this point where they want to make everything super scripted and make sure that these certain beats happen, they've cut off to where you can't do the same thing. And where essentially, if me and you played the story, every story beat happened the exact way for us.
Exact same way.
All
Which
right?
is not necessarily...
It's not a bad thing.
It's not a problem, and except the way the game wants you to play the rest of the game.
I think the game should have been either one or the other. If the whole game wanted to make sure that the entire game was a scripted, controlled experience from the get-go, it should have just been that. I think otherwise, if they wanted to make this open world that feels disjointed with the story, in my opinion, I think if you make that open world that way, then you need to carry that into the story, just like other games have done, like Dishonored. I know that this is a game that is in far, far higher scale, but let's try and compare the games in a way, the best way that you can.
I can't because I didn't play enough of Red Dead.
Okay, yeah.
I don't want to.
This is more on me, but I say compare it to something like Skyrim or even Oblivion, right? I think Oblivion's really a more graceful choice. When you look at this and you see something like Oblivion, which really lets you go through and do everything. So the Oblivion Brotherhood of the... the Dark Brotherhood? The Dark Brotherhood, yeah. When you're playing through that, you get told what you're supposed to do.
And then you get told the area.
And then you just say, here's who you need to kill. You figure out how you kill him.
You're not told the how.
Right? And then you roll through and you're like, am I going to drop this statue on his head?
I'm going to hit him with the poison apples.
Am I going to kill his butler dude who's so crazy and
that was
kill
one
him?
of the best missions in the game. The mansion mission.
Yeah. It's a great example of a game that says, tell you what, we're essentially going to say, here's the area. In this area, you're going to choose your own adventure. What do you want to do for it? You get to pick all these different cards and figure out what they are, and you're just going to do them. And you put them. You set those cards together how you want. Yeah, exactly. Here's all the dominoes. You put them up. You make them fall how you want to. But you are going to end up in a way of essentially everybody ends with the ending being gone, right? So, like one way I say this, in a lot of ways, I think that Detroit is a better example as to what Rockstar pretends that they are going towards, which is this game of endless choice, but it's not. It's a game that is so driven by one thing because they're trying to tell a great story, and they did. They told a great story, but they did so at the cost of making the game feel like a cohesive whole. And so as much as I love the game and I really think on it, I'm like, yeah, That was a great story, and I really love those characters. All of the weak points come from feeling disjointed. When I had fun out in the open world, it was in a way that felt wholly disconnected from what the story was trying to do otherwise, and it lost its sense of urgency. And I think that's why I often complain about open world games that try and do this, specifically Rockstar games, is that you can't create this false sense of urgency just to come back. Like, you can't say, and this is one of the earliest examples I can go into without going too spoilery, but in Chapter 2, you're supposed to be running from the Pinkertons, and you're like, okay, we can't stay here too long or cause too much trouble because the Pinkertons are going to find us, right? And that's this whole story thing. Yet, what do? If you want to, you can play the whole game, running around, killing people, stealing stuff. You can spend 30 hours in Chapter 2 if you want, and the Pinkertons don't come any closer to finding you because the story is not ready for them to come closer to finding you.
Right.
And that's an annoyance to me because it doesn't tie into the grand scheme of what the game is trying to say.
Yeah.
The game is trying to impress this sense of, you need to be good because we don't need to make too much of a mess. And of course, the game itself makes you make a mess as you move along. But you can go be as messy as you want to as long as you're not doing it in service of the story. And it doesn't change the fact that the Pinkertons aren't going to find you any sooner or later.
Not only that, but there's also a big. It's just the way the game's made. But it's very present in Red Dead 2, which in Chapter 2, if you are to go explore and say go to Valentine, you can go do all that stuff by yourself. If the story leads you back there, they're going to treat you like you've never been there.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you got to go buy a gun now. Let me go show you where this is at. I'm like, I've bought 3 guns now. And then it's like, go to the catalog and get a free gun. I was like, I got a gun.
Yeah.
It's like, buy the rifle you have in your inventory. Like, okay, it's free. It's my inventory.
That's my exact example of, in its effort to be so realistic in some areas and actually succeed,
it's very
when it's not realistic in other areas,
in some of those areas,
it ruins it.
Yeah.
Because most of the time you're able to suspend disbelief in games because of the fact that there's a consistency of, you understand the rules of the world, right? You're like, okay, well, that's going to be this way because it's a rule of how things are set up. But then these rules, there is no set rule in Red Dead 2. They don't stick to them. That's just not what happens, and it's a shame because it leads to a game that I really enjoyed, but cannot be as good of an experience because instead, God of War, which does gets it from not only the gameplay but from the story and its focus, its narrative focus, its direction focus, its pacing focus, which, like Saul and I mentioned, there's a couple of parts that feel like they could have been shortened, but they all seem to be in service of this great thing at the end, whereas Red Dead spends a lot of time doing things I don't feel are completely necessary.
Right.
Even in the actual story, but it all just feels disjointed, whereas God of War feels like this cohesive whole of something that by the time you're done with it, you feel like you experienced everything that the game had to offer for the most part, and in a way that felt like everything in the world was meant to be together in that sense. And that I just didn't ever get. I was always my most frustrated with Red Dead when I would actually start to do some of the side stuff just to realize that I have full control there, just to come back to the main story and realize I have no control. And it was this.
From what you're saying, I can pretty much agree. Since this is more of a Rockstar trait and a trait that's very present early in the game as well. Now, I will say that I really need to play through Red Dead 2 before I give my final thoughts on it of any kind, but I still think it's a fantastic game. And I don't want to take away Rockstar from what you made, so congratulations to Rockstar, but even more so congratulations to Sony Santa Monica.
Yeah.
Because, Corey, you made an amazing game, a masterpiece, one of my favorite games this generation, within my top 5. If not 5, then 10. That's a whole list for a whole other day. But any closing thoughts or anything?
Yeah, I guess to close off the Red Dead point, the reason that I even had to come to terms with this is that I said for a long time, and me and you've talked about it even on the podcast a few times, I never understood until I really stopped to think about it and really focus on what Red Dead 2 was. I never stopped to focus on exactly why I stopped liking Rockstar games the same way as I did early on in the PS2 days.
And this is kind of a reminder.
And this was it.
Yeah.
Early on in the Grand Theft Auto experience, it was about a game of you running around and literally doing what you wanted to, even in the story. But as they started trying to focus this narrative down, and it's why I think 4 was such a turning point for me, because 4 was the first game from Rockstar really that I'd played that was and definitely Grand Theft Auto that tried being 2 games at once. It tried pretending that you had ultimate control, but then never giving you that control. And I remember now that's what it's really that I noticed now. That's what 4 did that made me not like it. It took every bit of control I had, and it made me change the way I was playing those games. And it was like, this is not what I like about Rockstar. So I say forever, Rockstar games lost me at some point. Now I know why and how and when.
Makes sense. It makes complete sense.
Yep. Anyway, I think that about closes this one off for us. So as we continue to do more, we look forward to your support, and hopefully we can do some stuff that you enjoy. But hey, thank you for the for sending in your votes to the community. We appreciate doing that, and I like looking at what the community answer is versus ours, and that's where I'm going to leave it. This has been a fun year, and we appreciate it. So Merry Christmas, spend time with your family, and we have one more episode for the year. I'll go ahead and tease essentially what we're going to do. This is an episode full of us talking about the games that came out this year. So what we're going to do with our last episode of the year, the most fitting thing I saw is to go ahead and talk about all the games that we were excited for next year. So.
Yeah. So you guys enjoy time with your families. If you don't have any families, enjoy times with your friends and loved ones. And we'll see you guys next episode. Thank you all for tuning in, and thank you all for a wonderful year of fun.
Thank you. Thanks to our patrons, Chad V, Dan Barber, Josh Jarrell, Mikey 12, my name is Dan, Douglas Below, Sean Santarude, Shadowist, Steven Salazar, The Stonard, Travis Below, Blake Popst, and Eduardo Palomino. If you would like to support us, the show, and anything that we want to do in the future, please continue or click through the link in the description and do so. Thank you.